Welcome to Silent Soul Garden, the peaceful garden where your soul can rest. Find a truly comfortable posture. Gently close your eyes, release your shoulders, and breathe in deeply, then exhale very slowly. In the upcoming moments, there is absolutely nothing you need to worry about. Just let go, just listen. The meditation stories here will gently lead you through the layers of anxious waves, helping your mind to settle, and letting sleep come naturally as a soft breeze. Now, close your eyes and begin to connect with your own breath. As you breathe in, feel a refreshing breath enter your lungs, bringing life and rejuvenation. As you breathe out, allow all the worries and fatigue of the day to drift away like clouds dispersing across the sky. With each inhale, you expand your inner space. With each exhale, you let go of what is unnecessary, allowing your body and mind to gradually feel light. Now, notice your shoulders releasing, your face softly relaxing, and your hands becoming as light as though floating in space. Your entire body gently descends, as if being cradled by a gentle current. There is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to tense over. You only need to allow yourself to rest. Fully settle into this moment. Imagine before you an ancient wooden door. As the door opens, you step into a tranquil garden, where the wind softly brushes through green leaves, where the sound of a temple bell echoes long into the evening, where a small stream murmurs like an endless melody. Each step in that garden brings you farther away from the clutter of everyday life, and each breath carries you closer to profound peace. In this moment, you are ready to open your heart and listen to meditation stories, gentle tales that will guide your soul into stillness, where sleep will arrive naturally, softly, like a summer night breeze. Story 1: The Overfilled Cup. In a small temple on a mountainside, among pine trees swaying in the breeze, a renowned scholar came seeking the way. He carried with him countless books, knowledge, and the confidence that he deeply understood worldly truths. When he entered the meditation hall, he respectfully bowed to the meditation master, then began to speak without pause about everything he knew, philosophies he had read, studied, and pondered on throughout his life. His voice rushed forth like a flood, leaving no space for listening. The meditation master smiled quietly, did not interrupt, and slowly poured tea. The cup before the scholar gradually filled, then overflowed, spilling across the table and dropping in small droplets onto the wooden floor. The scholar was startled and exclaimed, "Master, the cup is full. You cannot pour in any more." The meditation master set the teapot down, looked directly into the scholar's eyes, and said gently, "Just like this cup, your mind is filled to the brim with knowledge and preconceptions. Unless it is emptied, how can I pour anything new into it?" Those words rang out like a bell through the forested mountains, leaving the scholar speechless. All the words he had intended to say caught in his throat. In that moment, he sensed a stirring within his heart, as though a door had opened. He bowed deeply, and began to learn how to listen. The old temple stood quietly in a misty valley, surrounded by rolling green mountains like a natural fortress protecting the peace within. The path to the temple was a winding trail blanketed with dry pine needles that rustled underfoot. Each morning, thick mist hung in the air, the sun like a deep red lantern suspended in the distance, while birdsong greeted the new day like a melody. It was in this place that the meditation master lived in seclusion for many years, becoming a guiding light for those who were drawn to him. One early summer afternoon, when the sunlight still lingered on the leaves, a famous scholar appeared in the area. He wore a brocade long tunic in deep blue, held a fan in hand, his eyes brimming with the confidence of someone who had devoted his life to books. Over many years, he became renowned for his rhetorical skills, his encyclopedic memory, and the sharpness of his words. Yet deep inside, he felt a void, an uneasy restlessness he could not name. So when he heard of the meditation master, he decided to ascend the mountain in hopes of finding answers. Upon entering the courtyard, he was overwhelmed by the tranquility. No noise, no dust, only the faint chime of wind bells stirring in the mountain breeze. He felt something unusual, but quickly regained his usual confidence. When he met the meditation master, he bowed but soon began speaking without pause. He recounted rare books he had read, Eastern-Western philosophies he had studied, concluding that he understood the truths of life better than anyone. His words poured out like a waterfall, filling the small meditation hall completely. The meditation master listened silently, his face unchanged. He picked up a ceramic teapot and began to pour tea into a cup. The green tea gradually filled the cup, overflowing, running down the edge, and dripping onto the wooden table. The scholar frowned, finally unable to contain himself, and exclaimed, "Master, the cup is full. Why do you keep pouring? It will all spill." The meditation master set down the teapot. With gentle, serene eyes and a voice calm as a bell, he said, "Your mind is the same. It is already full of knowledge, preconceptions, and so-called understanding. Unless it is emptied, how can it hold anything new?" At that moment, the scholar was stunned into silence. In an instant, his usually profound words vanished. He felt like a child standing before a vast ocean, realizing his burdens were little more than trivial baggage. His pride shattered, revealing a void both terrifying and liberating. He bowed his head, his hand trembling lightly, unable to utter another word. Outside, the mountain wind still blows, and the pine leaves continue to whisper. The sound of water dripping from the teacup onto the wooden floor echoes steadily, marking the moment when a soul begins to learn how to let go. The moment the tea overflowed, the scholar sat in stunned silence. In that brief instant, he realized that the sound of overflowing was not just the noise of the water. It was also the echo of his mind. A mind that had carried too much, weighed down so heavily that there was no longer space for stillness. He sat there, unsettled, eyes fixed on the droplets of tea falling steadily onto the floor, like the slow ticking of time, awakening something deep within him that he had long forgotten. In the scholar's mind, layers of memory came rushing back. He remembered the early years of his youth, when he first stepped onto the path of knowledge. Back then, he was so passionate about reading that he would forget to eat and sleep. Each page opened up a vast world before him. He believed that if he absorbed enough, he would one day understand the laws of the universe and discover the path to inner peace. But the more he studied, the more restless he became. His mind felt like a room packed with books, cramped and suffocating. Despite the praise he received from others, deep down, he felt a vague unease, as if all that knowledge was merely smoke hiding something essential that he had never truly touched. The meditation master sat across from him, his gaze calm as still water, neither hurried nor judgmental. He gently set the teapot down and brought his palms together in silence. The room was filled with a strange atmosphere, not an empty silence, but one brimming with life, where even a breath sounded like a verse of a sacred chant. The scholar felt his heartbeat slow, and the storm of thoughts in his head began to fade. He wanted to argue. He wanted to say that knowledge had value, that learning could not possibly be meaningless. But his lips only moved slightly. No words came out. Deep down, he knew the meditation master was not rejecting knowledge. He was simply showing a basic truth. When knowledge becomes a burden, it is no longer light, it becomes an overfilled cup, spilling and useless. Outside, the day slowly turned to dusk. The final rays of sunlight passed through the small window, casting a long beam across the wooden floor. The scholar sat still, watching that beam of light shift slowly like the hand of a cosmic clock. With each passing moment, a part of his pride fell away. In his heart, he seemed to hear a whisper, "Empty it, empty it." He looked up. The confidence in his eyes had disappeared, replaced by a softness, almost a fragility. In a hoarse voice choked with emotion, he asked quietly, "Master, if my mind is already full, how can I empty it?" The meditation master smiled gently, a kind smile as serene as the full moon. There was no judgment, only compassion. He answered slowly, each word falling like drops of water soaking into dry earth. Learn to stop speaking, and begin to listen. Learn to stop holding on, and begin to let go. An empty mind is not one that knows nothing, but one that is not attached to what it knows. When you let go, you will find space. And when there is space, truth will find its way in. Upon hearing those words, the scholar felt as if a door inside him had cracked open. He did not fully understand, but for the first time, he felt a lightness he had never known. Like someone who had carried a heavy load their whole life and finally set it down by the roadside. He exhaled deeply, his once tense shoulders now relaxed. He suddenly realized that for all these years, he had never truly listened, not to others, not to the wind, not to the birds, not even to his own breath. He had only listened to the echo of his own ego. And now, in this silence, for the first time, he could hear the simple presence of life surrounding him. Outside, the temple bell rang unexpectedly. Its clear tone carried far, blending with the evening wind and dissolving into the stillness. That sound seemed to emphasize the lesson he had just received, carving it deeply into the scholar's heart. He closed his eyes, allowing the bell's resonance to lead his spirit, no longer resisting, no longer debating, only listening. As dusk fell, the scholar bid farewell to the meditation master and descended the mountain. The path home was a gently sloping trail lined with green pine trees on either side. He walked as if he had just passed through a great storm, moist earth beneath his feet. Cool and fresh air all around, but still dotted with puddles reflecting the sky now painted in hues of twilight. His steps were no longer swift, but slow and heavy. As thoughts stirred deeply within, he remembered the meditation master's kind eyes, his brief but profound words, and the image of the overflowing teacup that continued to haunt him. It dawned on him that all these years, he had been so obsessed with filling his cup with knowledge that he had never once thought to empty it. Like someone wandering through the marketplace of life, carrying a bag already bursting at the seams, yet trying to cram in more and more, leaving no room for even a single pearl to slip inside. That night, he returned home with a strange feeling in his heart. The familiar study room, lined with hundreds of books stacked from wall to wall, which once made him proud, now felt suffocating. Each book seemed like a brick, building a wall around him. He sat at his desk and opened a sacred scripture. But the words on the page suddenly blurred. He read, but nothing registered, as if his mind had been veiled by the sound of the bell echoing from the distant temple. The scholar tried to follow the meditation master's advice, to sit quietly and listen. At first, he heard the insects chirping in the garden, the wind brushing against the window bars, the thudding of his own heartbeat. But soon after, a wave of thoughts rose within him again. How can I possibly abandon all knowledge? Does that mean the years I spent studying were meaningless? If I let it go, what will remain of me? He questioned himself, argued with himself, as if debating his own soul. And finally, exhausted, he collapsed onto the desk in a restless slumber. In his dream, he found himself crossing a vast field. In his arms, he carried an enormous teacup, so heavy that his shoulders trembled beneath its weight. The cup kept being filled, spilling over, forcing him to walk in a torrent of water. The rising flood made him stumble. Yet he kept holding onto the cup. Just when it seemed he would drown, a voice rang out, "Let it go." Startled, his hands shook, and when he finally released the cup, his entire body became weightless. The water receded, and only a clear sky remained. He awoke with a jolt, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding wildly. The next morning, he sat on the veranda, watching the sunlight rise. For the first time in many years, he allowed himself to sit still without opening a book. He watched each leaf as it fell, listened to each bird singing. There was something so simple, yet deeply peaceful. He thought to himself, perhaps this is the emptiness the master wanted me to understand. In the days that followed, he tried to let go, just a little. Each evening, instead of reading dozens of pages, he simply sat quietly, breathing and listening. Though thoughts continued to echo in his mind, he patiently returned to his breath. He began to realize, emptiness did not mean throwing everything away. It meant no longer being bound by those things. 2 weeks later, he decided to return to the temple. This time, his steps were slower, unhurried. When he met the meditation master, he did not rush to speak, nor did he boast. He simply bowed his head and remained silent for a long while. The master looked at him and gently nodded, as if he could already see a small seed beginning to sprout. "Have you tried emptying the cup?" the master asked. The scholar replied in a soft voice, "I have not been able to empty it completely, but I have seen that when I let go a little, there is room for peace in my heart." The master smiled. "That is enough. You have taken your first steps. Keep walking, and you will see there is no longer any cup that needs to be full or empty, for you are the stream." Hearing this, the scholar was shaken to the core. He suddenly understood. It was not just about emptying, but about seeing his true nature, not confined to a small cup. Knowledge, experience, memory, they were all just water. When he clung to them, He thought he was the cup. But in letting go, he realized he was the endless stream. In that moment, tears fell from his eyes. But they were not tears of disappointment, they were tears of liberation. Story 2: The sound of one hand clapping. In an ancient temple nestled deep within the forest, where the wind blowing through the trees created an endless melody, there lived a young novice who studied the way under the guidance of an old meditation master. The novice was bright, quick-witted, and eager to learn. He longed to attain enlightenment, hoping to become someone who fully understood the truth. But because his desire was so intense, his mind was often restless, always chasing results. One autumn morning, as golden leaves covered the path, the novice came before his master, bowed, and said, "Master, please give me a koan to meditate on." The master looked at his disciple with calm eyes. He did not answer right away. Instead, he slowly turned his gaze to the veranda, where a single leaf was swirling through the air. Then he turned back and asked, "Let me hear the sound of one hand clapping." The novice was stunned, thinking he had misheard. One hand? How could that make a clapping sound? Clapping requires two hands striking each other. He furrowed his brow, trying to figure it out. But the more he thought, the more tangled his mind became. Eventually, he bowed his head. "Master, I do not understand." The master nodded gently. "Not understanding is good. Then stay with the question. Do not try to force an answer right away. Let it live inside you, day after day, night after night." From that day on, the novice began his journey with the strange koan, the sound of one hand clapping. At first, he tried everything. He raised one hand and waved it through the air, listening for any sound. He struck his palm against the table, against his chest, against the ground, but none of it felt like clapping in the way his master meant. At night, he lay awake, the question repeating in his mind like a small flame that refused to go out. There were moments he grew angry. Did the master give me a nonsense question just to mock me? How can one hand make a clapping sound? But every time he saw his master still calmly meditating, breathing slowly, eyes glowing with clarity, the novice's heart would waver again. If it were meaningless, why would the master give it with such a serious expression? Days and months passed, and the novice began to change. From someone eager to find the answer quickly, he started to live with the question. While sweeping the courtyard, he listened to the broom brushing against the dry leaves and wondered, could this be the sound of one hand clapping? When drawing water from the well, he heard the wooden bucket hit the stone rim, echoing outward, and asked, "Is this it?" While sitting beneath a tree, listening to the falling leaves, to the stirring wind, he asked, could this be the one? Every sound in daily life became a doorway that brought him closer to the koan. He no longer rushed to solve it, but slowly learned to listen with his entire being. One night under the full moon, the novice sat alone on the temple steps. The silence was so deep he could hear his own heartbeat. Suddenly, he realized, the sound of one hand clapping is not something the ears can hear. It is the sound of presence itself, the voice of the invisible, which the heart must feel. In that moment, he entered a strange stillness, as if his very being had melted into the night. The next morning, he came to his master and bowed deeply. He did not need to say much, the light in his eyes said everything. The master smiled and nodded slightly. He offered no praise, No explanation. He simply said, "Keep listening. That sound will stay with you for life." From then on, the koan, the sound of one hand clapping, became his companion in every breath. Every step. At first, it had irritated him, like a thorn stuck in his mind. But the longer he lived with it, the more he realized that its very mystery had forced him to let go of habitual thinking. No longer chasing after scriptures. No longer obsessed with logical answers. He began to accept not knowing. Each morning, when sweeping the temple courtyard, the soft swishing of the broom across the stone tiles became something he listened to with his whole heart. In that moment, he asked himself, could this be the sound of one hand clapping? A sound needing no collision, just the gentle contact between bamboo and earth? And then he laughed, feeling like a child playing with the sounds of life. At noon, as the novice went to draw water from the well, he heard the wooden bucket knock against the stone rim, followed by the rushing sound of water rising. He listened closely, sensing that this was not merely physical sound, but something carrying the breath of the earth and sky. A thought arose in him. Perhaps this is the sound of one hand clapping, the sound of interaction, of pure presence. Yet the moment the thought formed, he felt it was somehow still incomplete. That night, sitting alone on the temple steps, he watched the moonlight spill across the courtyard, illuminating every leaf. The silence was deep, pierced only by the soft rustle of insects and the gentle wind. Suddenly, he heard his own heartbeat, clear, like the beating of a small drum in his chest. He thought, is this not also the sound of one hand clapping? An invisible hand tapping out the rhythm of life within me. The feeling filled him with awe. But when he went to tell his master, the meditation master only shook his head with a gentle smile. Not yet. Keep listening. Those words disappointed him at first. But then he understood. A koan is not meant to deliver a single answer. It is meant to lead the mind into an endless journey. Each time he thought, I understand, the master would gently show him that he had only touched the surface. There were days the young novice felt so lost he wept. Sitting beneath the Bodhi tree, he clutched his head and muttered, how can one hand clap? Is the master simply testing me? Is there nothing to be found? But in the depths of that despair, he realized, perhaps the point was not the answer, but simply being with the question. Like a seed resting in the soil, it needs no force to sprout. It only needs time and presence. One morning, as the sun rose over the mountain ridge, he followed his master to the meditation hall. The meditation master sat upright in silence. The novice knelt beside him, his heart full of uncertainty. In that space, time seemed to stand still. He could hear the distant chirping of birds, the breeze slipping through the cracks in the wooden doors, the droplets of sweat falling from his brow. And then, suddenly, he felt his entire being fall into vast stillness. No more questions, no more effort to understand, only presence. In that moment, he seemed to hear the sound of one hand clapping, not a sound heard with ears, but a resonance echoing from absolute silence. When he opened his eyes, the master was still sitting there, his gaze kind and calm, as though he already knew everything the novice had just experienced. The young monk wanted to speak, but the master raised his hand in a gesture of silence. There were no words, only a slow, gentle smile that confirmed the novice had found the door. From that day on, he no longer rushed to find the answer. When sweeping the courtyard, he simply swept. When cooking rice, he simply cooked. When hearing the wind, he simply listened. Everyday tasks became complete in themselves. Needing no explanation, the sound of one hand clapping was no longer a riddle to solve. It became a reminder to return to the present moment. Time passed, and season after season of fallen leaves covered the temple courtyard. The young novice slowly matured. The youthful restlessness faded, replaced by a quiet depth. In the past, he had longed to find a complete answer to the koan, the sound of one hand clapping. But after many years, he realized the answer was not a destination, it was the journey itself. Each step, each breath, each sound in daily life whispered, "Listen." One winter evening, as the northern wind howled through the cracks in the temple walls, he sat by the fire, watching the embers glow. Each crackle of burning wood reminded him of the old koan. But instead of trying to analyze it, he simply smiled, letting the sound become a note in life's infinite symphony. A simple joy arose in his heart, light as breath. On another day, walking with his master along the riverbank, he heard the water lapping against the shore, the waves striking the rocks. He stood still, his eyes bright. The meditation master looked at him and nodded softly, saying nothing, for both of them knew no words were needed, because what needed to be heard was already present in that very moment. The young novice had gone through many phases of inner struggle. There were times when he thought he had attained awakening, only to realize he was still clinging to a shallow layer. There were moments of frustration, when he felt nothing had been found. Yet in that very not finding, a great door had opened. The sound of one hand clapping was not a tangible noise. It was an invitation to return to stillness, to the invisible presence always here. Years passed. The novice became a young monk. People in the nearby village began to admire him, often visiting to seek wisdom. When someone asked, "Teacher, what is the sound of one hand clapping?" the young monk simply smiled without answering. Sometimes, he would raise his hand and spread his fingers in silence. And in that silence, the questioner would begin to hear what needed to be heard. One day, a scholar came to the temple, bringing with him volumes of philosophical analysis. He tried to break down the koan, offering countless theories: the wind, the heartbeat, the sound of waves. The young monk listened quietly, not arguing, only pouring tea. When the cup filled, the scholar quickly warned him. At that moment, the monk softly said, "You are walking the path of the overflowing cup." The scholar froze, suddenly realizing he was falling into the same old trap, too caught up in reasoning. He bowed his head in silence. And in that silence, he heard the sound of one hand clapping, not from the outside, but from the emptiness within his own heart. From then on, the koan was no longer just a lesson for the novice of years past. It became a seed planted everywhere. Those who were ready, when touched by that stillness, began to wonder for themselves, "Am I hearing the sound of one hand clapping?" And each person, in their own way, found the answer within their life. The young monk understood one thing deeply. A koan is not meant to be explained. It is meant to stir the waters of the mind, to make us look inward. Just like the sound of one hand clapping, no one can hear it for you. No one can hand you the answer. Each person must listen with their own silent heart. Story 3: The finger pointing to the moon. On a night when the moon was full, Its gentle light spread across the temple garden, casting a magical glow over each stone and bamboo branch. The breeze rustled through the leaves, blending with the sound of the wind chimes hanging at the edge of the meditation hall. That peaceful scene seemed as though the entire universe was meditating alongside them. A group of disciples gathered around the meditation master, their eyes filled with eagerness. They had spent many months reciting sutras, meditating, and studying, yet within their hearts remained a longing to grasp the ultimate truth, the one they believed would bring complete enlightenment. One of them spoke up, his voice sincere and pleading. "Master, please show us the path to truth. We want to see the ultimate reality." The master did not answer right away. He lifted his gaze toward the sky, where a bright full moon was shining. Slowly, his thin finger rose, pointing directly at the moon. The disciples all looked up, but some could not help focusing on the master's finger. They began to whisper among themselves, was the finger long or short? Steady or trembling? Slender or firm? One even thought, perhaps the secret lies in this finger itself, for the master is showing it under the full moon. The meditation master turned back to them with a smile, gentle yet piercing. He said softly, "My children, remember this. The finger points to the moon, but it is not the moon. If you keep staring at the finger, you will never see the moon." His words rang out like a bell in the stillness of night. Some of the disciples looked confused, not yet grasping the meaning. Others blushed, realizing they had fallen into error. But all remained silent, for they sensed they had just received a profound reminder. From that night onward, a deep contemplation arose within each of them. They began to wonder, all these years, what fingers have we been staring at? The rituals, the chants, the doctrines, could all of these be just fingers? While the truth lies far beyond, where the eyes of the heart must turn. That moonlit night became a turning point in their spiritual journey. The image of the finger pointing to the sky stayed vivid in their minds, reminding them not to lose sight of the essence beneath the forms. After that night, the hearts of the disciples were no longer as still as before. The master's words, "The finger points to the moon, but it is not the moon," echoed endlessly, like a long, unbroken chime. At first, many felt disoriented, even shaken, for they realized they had unknowingly tied their minds to fingers, rituals, verses, explanations. They asked themselves, if all of this is only a tool, then what is the true reality we are meant to see? A young disciple, intelligent but impatient, brought his confusion to the others. He said with urgency, "Are not the scriptures the very words of the Buddha? If the master says they are merely fingers, then what foundation do we have for our practice? Has all our effort been in vain?" The eldest among them, calm and composed, replied, "I do not believe the master is denying the value of the scriptures. He is simply reminding us that they are not the destination. Just as a map is not the land, and a raft is not the other shore." Those words left everyone in silence. Each one felt as though they stood at a crossroads. To cling to form was to be lost in fingers. But to abandon everything too quickly risked falling into emptiness. Time passed. They continued to recite sutras, meditate, sweep the courtyard, and cook meals as before. But now, in every action, the master's teaching burned quietly like an inner flame. While chanting, one would wonder, am I reciting the Buddha's words, or just counting syllables? While meditating, another would ask, am I seeking truth, or just holding onto the posture? Each simple act became a quiet test. One morning, as they swept leaves from the courtyard, one disciple paused and looked up at the pale moon lingering in the sky. He sighed. All these years, I focused so much on the broom, thinking the broom was the task. But perhaps what the Master truly wanted was for me to sweep the dust from my heart. Hearing this, another stopped in his tracks. They suddenly realized everything around them could become a finger, the broom, the bowl, the sutra, each pointing towards something beyond form. When the disciples debated, the Master did not interfere. He silently observed, letting them wrestle in the ocean of questions. For he knew that confusion was fertile soil, where the seed of awakening could begin to grow. If he gave them answers too soon, that seed would never find its way to the surface. On another full moon night, its light poured across the courtyard. The disciples sat quietly on the porch, remembering the moment their Master had pointed at the moon. This time, no one discussed the finger. They simply gazed at the luminous moon. In its soft glow, something in their hearts gently opened, a clarity beyond words. The Master appeared and sat beside them. Saying nothing, he too looked up at the moon, his eyes filled with peace. Together, teacher and student sat in perfect silence. And in that silence, they realized, sometimes, no explanation is needed. To see the moon directly is enough for the heart to shine. One early winter morning, mist veiled the pine trees, and cold wind carried droplets of dew, making the courtyard damp. The disciples swept together in silence. But today was different. No one spoke. Their hearts still echoed with the moonlight from the night before, and the deep stillness they had shared with their Master. It felt as if each of them was drawing nearer to something unnamed. After their morning tasks, they gathered before the meditation master and knelt. The eldest disciple spoke. Master, we still do not fully understand your teaching. We know the finger is not the moon. But even as we gaze at the moon, our minds still waver. Please guide us further, so we do not lose our way. The meditation master sat still, his eyes gently closed, breath steady and calm. A long moment passed before he opened his eyes and looked directly at each disciple. His voice was quiet yet firm. You say you want to see the moon. But remember, even the moon is merely a reflection. When the clouds gather and hide the moon, what will you do? If you cling to the shape of the shining moon, you will continue to suffer. Truth is not that glowing moon, but the vast sky that holds both moon and cloud. His words felt like a cold wind brushing across their hearts. Some of the disciples were startled, for they had long believed that the moon was the ultimate truth. But now, the Master revealed that even the moon was only a symbol, a pointer. If they stopped there, they would once again fall into attachment. A young disciple, trembling, asked, "Then, where should we look?" The meditation master replied, his eyes glowing like a flame in the night. "Look with a silent, empty mind. When the mind is clear, everything is the moon, the sound of wind, the drop of dew, the steps upon the earth. Only when you let go of both the finger and the moon will you see the boundless sky. That is the truth, unclouded and infinite." The group fell silent. In that moment, the Master's words were no longer philosophy, they were waves striking straight into their hearts. They sat still, feeling a deep resonance echo through their entire beings. From that day forward, their practice changed. They no longer fixated on right or wrong in every word, but focused on sensing life itself. When cooking rice, the scent of smoke became a Dharma teaching. When hearing the laughter of children at the temple gate, they heard it as a sutra. When watching the river flow, they no longer searched for the moon elsewhere, but saw the vastness reflected in the moving water itself. One day, as the crescent moon floated gently in the sky, a disciple suddenly exclaimed, "Master, now I understand. The finger, the moon, the sky, they are all gateways. What I need is not to hold onto any image, but to see the truth alive in each breath I take." The master smiled, nodded, and turned away without saying a word. But that smile was enough to let them know they were walking the right path. Many years passed. The disciples of that time matured. Some remained at the temple. Others descended the mountain to teach the way, each one following their own journey. But within their hearts, the image of the Master's finger pointing at the moon under the silent night sky remained forever lit. Like a guiding lantern, the meditation master gradually grew weaker with age. His hair turned white, his back stooped, and his voice softened, yet his eyes remained clear as ever. On quiet late afternoons, he would often sit beneath the ancient cypress tree, gazing toward the distant horizon. Sometimes disciples gathered around him, sometimes only a few were present. But he no longer lectured much. Instead, he would simply smile and raise his hand to the sky, even when no moon could be seen. One evening, with only a sliver of moonlight hanging in the dark, a disciple asked, "Master, in the past you pointed to the full moon. Now, you raise your hand in darkness. With nothing to see, what are we meant to find?" The meditation master gently replied, "Back then, you needed the moon to remember that the finger was not the destination. But now, you no longer need the moon. The sky is still here, whether it is light or dark. The moon may wax or wane, appear or vanish, but the sky has never disappeared." His words left them speechless. In that moment, they understood. All this time, they had still been unknowingly searching for the moon as a symbol of truth. But now, the Master was guiding them even beyond that. When there is no more clinging, no more seeking, truth reveals itself, present in every breeze, every drop of dew, every step upon the earth. In the final years of his life, the Master spoke very little. He lived in complete silence, as though his very being had become a wordless teaching. Disciples who came to visit would find him sitting quietly in the golden light of evening, offering only a gentle smile and a distant gaze. In that gaze, they felt the vast sky itself. There was no longer a finger, no longer a moon, only boundless space beyond words. On the day of his passing, the Master sat upright, his eyes lifted toward the open sky. Before his disciples, he raised his hand one final time, not pointing anywhere at all. Then, he closed his eyes, his breath faded, light as the wind, and he quietly left this world. The disciples wept, yet they also felt an extraordinary peace. They knew the Master had never truly left. He had given them one last lesson: the finger, the moon, the sky, all were reminders. The truth was never somewhere else, it had always been right here, within themselves, in this very moment. From then on, they passed down the story of the finger pointing to the moon, through generations. But none of them repeated the master's words exactly. Each one told it in their own way, some through the image of bamboo, others through the sound of water, and some only through silence while gazing at the sky. For they knew, if the story became a rigid formula, it would become just another finger. And so, through each generation, the teaching remained alive, not as fixed philosophy, but as a flowing stream, ever changing, always reminding, go beyond the form, and touch the truth that is alive in each breath, each heartbeat, each gaze. One autumn afternoon, as golden leaves gently fell across the temple porch, the meditation master called a young disciple to his side. The young man was intelligent and quick-witted. He had studied the scriptures for many years, but his heart remained heavy with the desire to attain enlightenment. He believed that if he could just understand one more layer of meaning, if he could find the correct answer, he would reach awakening. The master handed him a clear glass bottle. Inside the bottle sat a small clay goose, carefully placed there when the glass was still soft, so that it could not be removed through any conventional means. Raising the bottle, the master asked, "This goose is inside the bottle. Find a way to get it out, without breaking the bottle and without harming the goose." The disciple took the bottle, turning it over and over in his hands, his brows tightly furrowed. He considered every possibility: cutting off the neck of the bottle, removing the base, heating the glass to make it expand, but all of these would mean breaking the bottle. Then he thought, what if I shrink the goose? But that too would mean changing its nature. His heart pounded as he looked up and said, "Master, this is impossible." The master said nothing. He only smiled, eyes seeming to pierce straight through the young man's thoughts, and then walked away, leaving the disciple sitting alone with the bottle in his hand and confusion in his heart. That night, the young man could not sleep. The question echoed endlessly in his mind. How do I take the goose out without breaking the bottle or harming it? His intellect screamed for an answer, but every solution contradicted itself. He began to feel as if his own mind was trapped inside an invisible bottle, tight, suffocating, desperate to escape. Ever since receiving the koan, the goose in the bottle, the young disciple had known no peace. During the day, when sweeping leaves with the other monks, the swishing of the broom reminded him of the goose brushing against the glass. When carrying water, the image of the bucket sinking into the well made him think about emptiness and fullness of the bottle. At night, in the stillness, he dreamed of being trapped in a giant bottle, pounding his fists against the glass, but no one could hear him. At first, he sought out his fellow monks for advice. One laughed and said, "Easy, just break the bottle." He shook his head. The master was clear: we must not break the bottle, and we must not harm the goose. If it were that simple, it would not be a koan. Another suggested, then imagine the goose shrinking and slipping out the neck of the bottle. He sighed, but the goose is fully grown. If I shrink it, I am changing its nature. Surely the master does not want me to cheat like that. Each answer only deepened his confusion. He began to feel as if the koan were a towering stone wall, impossible to climb. Night after night, he sat beside his oil lamp, turning the bottle in his hands. He looked at the small clay goose inside, silent, proud, as if mocking his helplessness. "Come out," he whispered. "I want to free you, but how?" He tried every approach: science, logic, clever tricks. But the harder he tried, the more tangled his thoughts became. One night, he broke down, weeping, pounding the floor. There is no way. This koan is absurd. The next morning, he went to the master and bowed deeply. Master, I have thought about this endlessly and still see no solution. Please show me the way. The meditation master looked at him, smiled gently, and said nothing. Then he picked up a fallen leaf, placed it in the young man's hand, and slowly asked, "Where did this leaf come from?" The disciple answered immediately, "It fell from the tree." The master nodded, then asked again, "And where is it going?" The disciple hesitated. "To the ground, where it will decay." The master smiled warmly. "Do you see? You are always looking for an exit." A reasonable answer. But truth is often not in the answer. It is in seeing things as they truly are. The goose in the bottle is the same. The more you struggle to find a way out, the more you trap yourself inside the bottle of your own thinking. Hearing this, the young man felt as though lightning had struck his heart. Staggering out of the room, his mind was even more tangled, but something had begun to shine within. From that day forward, instead of chasing a solution, he tried to listen to the koan as if it were an echo, a companion. While sweeping the courtyard, he listened to the rustle of leaves and thought, "Is the goose shifting inside the bottle?" When drawing water, he heard the dripping sounds and wondered, "Is that the sound of a path forming?" His entire life became a mirror for the koan, exhausting yet strangely compelling. Time passed, and the initial confusion slowly gave way to a quiet presence. He realized it was not the koan that had trapped him, but his own logic. In the days that followed, the young disciple grew quieter. He no longer asked his fellow monks for advice or begged the master for an answer. Instead, he allowed the koan, the goose in the bottle, to soak into every breath of daily life. He swept the courtyard, carried water, but in each motion, his heart faintly echoed the image of the little goose tapping silently against the bottle's wall. At night, long after the temple had fallen silent, he sat alone under the eaves. A crescent moon hung above the sky, casting soft silver light across the courtyard. The shadows of bamboo trees danced on the stone floor in the breeze. He looked up at the moon and remembered the night the master had pointed at the sky with all the monks. The finger points to the moon, but it is not the moon. That phrase echoed again in his heart. He wondered, perhaps the goose is also a finger? And the bottle, just another cloud? He let out a bitter laugh, knowing he was still trying to reason his way through. And each time the mind tried to grasp it, the goose became even more tightly trapped. One day, while watering vegetables in the garden, the young man paused to observe a small caterpillar struggling to emerge from its cocoon. It twisted, strained, then slowly broke free from its tight shell. The sight left him speechless. The goose in the bottle, the caterpillar in the cocoon. Perhaps escape does not require breaking anything, but only seeing that there was never truly a cocoon holding us. The thought flashed and vanished, leaving behind a quiet taste he could not quite grasp. He brought that feeling into meditation. For the first time in many months, he did not try to solve anything. He simply sat, eyes closed, listening to his breath in and out, hearing his heartbeat, hearing the wind rustle through bamboo leaves outside the porch. In that moment, he felt his body become light, as if no wall existed at all. The image of the bottle disappeared. All that remained was the flow of life, free and unbounded. That night, he had a very different dream. Once again, he saw himself trapped in the glass bottle. But this time, instead of struggling, he sat still. And strangely, the bottle slowly turned transparent, until it vanished completely. The little goose inside spread its wings and flew free, without anything needing to be broken. When he woke, his eyes were wet, but his heart was light. The next morning, he went to the meditation master. Without waiting for a word, he knelt and bowed 3 times. The master looked at him, eyes glowing, and gently asked, "Where is the goose now?" The disciple looked up, his eyes radiant. "Master, it was never trapped." The master burst into laughter, clear and bright like a bell echoing through the mountains. Then he nodded, saying nothing more, because that was enough. The student had passed through the gate of the koan. He had stepped out of the bottle of his own mind. From that day forward, the young disciple no longer chased answers. He lived his daily life with ease and joy, chopping wood, carrying water, tending the garden, yet every movement was filled with a new kind of freedom. He knew now. The bottle was never outside, it was always inside his mind. And when the mind opens, the goose is already free. Story 5: The Hollow Bamboo. An ancient temple stood deep within a vast bamboo forest. Whenever the wind passed through, the entire grove came alive with sound, the rustling of leaves, the clacking of bamboo stalks, the murmuring of wind like waves at sea. For those who lived there long enough, that sound became the endless soundtrack of monastic life. A young novice had recently joined the temple. He came from a prestigious family. Bright, sharp, and quick with words, he was often praised by the other monks. But that praise slowly fed his pride. He believed he understood the Dharma faster than the others, that his knowledge was deeper than his fellow practitioners. There was always a glimmer of arrogance in his eyes, barely hidden. One morning, as the disciples sat meditating beneath the bamboo trees, the elderly meditation master slowly walked past. He stopped and looked at the young novice with eyes that were kind, yet piercing. Suddenly, he pointed to a tall stalk of bamboo nearby and asked, "What do you see in this bamboo?" The novice looked up and answered without hesitation, "Master, I see a tall, straight, and sturdy bamboo." The master smiled faintly, then tapped the bamboo with his finger. A hollow echo rang out, long and clear in the wind. He spoke slowly. "The bamboo stands tall because it is hollow inside. One who walks the way, if their mind is not empty, how can it receive the Dharma?" That sentence dropped into the young novice's ears like a heavy stone falling into a still pond. His confidence trembled. Empty? An empty mind? But if it is empty, does that not mean ignorance? He wondered silently. But the master had already walked away, leaving him alone with the sound of bamboo echoing in the breeze. From that day on, the 3 words, "hollow bamboo," clung to his thoughts like a koan. Every time he walked past the forest, every time he heard the wind rushing through, he felt uneasy. Was the master pointing at me? Are my thoughts just an outer shell, with nothing inside? The questions made him angry, curious, and deeply eager to understand. The next morning, as the first light broke and dew still clung to the bamboo leaves, the novice sought out the master. His heart was heavy with confusion and a bit of wounded pride. Bowing respectfully, he asked, "Master, yesterday you said the bamboo stands strong because it is hollow inside. But is not emptiness useless? If bamboo has no core, is it not weak and easy to break? And as for me, I have studied much and learned much. Are you saying that is somehow wrong?" The master looked at him quietly, eyes kind but deep as still water. He did not reply right away. Instead, he picked up a nearby bamboo staff and tapped it gently against the ground. A dry, echoing sound filled the air, then faded. "What do you hear?" he asked. "I hear the staff striking the earth," the novice answered, voice tinged with frustration. "Exactly," the master smiled. "If the staff were solid, it would not echo. Because it is hollow, it can resonate. The same is true for people. If the mind is full of pride and attachment, how can it ever resonate with the Dharma?" The novice was speechless. He wanted to argue, but something inside him had begun to stir. All this time, he believed that more knowledge meant greater strength, greater certainty. But now, the master was showing him that emptiness was the true power. "But, if the mind is empty, then what remains for me to follow the path?" he asked. His voice growing quiet, the meditation master smiled gently, then waved his finger toward the vast bamboo forest before them. "Listen," he said. A breeze swept in from the mountainside, causing the bamboo grove to rustle, the stalks brushing against each other, producing a long, resonant sound. The young novice closed his eyes for the first time and let his mind settle. The sound was no longer random noise, it was as though it were an invisible melody, filled with life. "Do you hear it?" the master asked. "I hear the bamboo singing," the novice replied. "No," the master shook his head. "You hear the wind moving through the hollow. If the bamboo were solid, you would hear nothing. Likewise, if your mind is filled with ego, knowledge, and pride, there will be no space for the wind of the Dharma to pass through." The novice opened his eyes, his heart racing. The teacher's words felt like a blade slicing through the shell of arrogance that had been enclosing his heart. He saw the truth clearly. He had been stuffing his mind like he was packing books into a bag, never leaving any space for life to speak. From that day forth, the image of the hollow bamboo haunted him like a koan. Wherever he went, whatever he did, he heard the wind blowing through bamboo, echoing his constant reminder, "Be empty, be empty." For days afterward, the novice lived as though walking on a narrow bridge spanning a mountain chasm, every step conscious of the gap beneath. He began to notice details previously ignored. While washing bowls, the sound of water running over their curves felt like a silken ribbon threading through his fingers. Carrying water along stone paths, the wooden bucket's creak became the breath of the slope itself. When sitting beneath the bamboo, he no longer heard a general rustle. He felt each stalk vibrating just enough to let the wind pass. At night, he chose to sit longer without reciting sutras or chanting mantras, just breathing. Just watching the flickering oil lamps on the wooden walls. Yet his ego would subtly re-enter, like a hidden root winding back in. The moment he felt his mind expand, it would whisper, "You are doing well, you are nearly awake." And just like that, everything would stiffen. His breath grew heavy, his back ached, his eyes dried, and he knew he had lost the space again. One rainy morning, The master assigned him to guide two newcomers in sweeping the courtyard. He carefully adjusted their grip, warned about the angle of the broom, matched their rhythm, even accounted for the wind's direction. Everything was doing correctly. Informed by his books and experience, by the time he looked back, the courtyard was cleaner, but the faces of the two novices were blank, shoulders hunched, lips tight. They had swept correctly but without life. In that moment, a bamboo leaf fell and struck the tip of his broom. The hollow sound it produced whispered softly, "The bamboo does not teach the wind by command. It simply remains empty and lets the wind pass through." At midday, the young novice relayed this insight to an elder monk who often sat silently on the mossy porch. The elder told him, "Teaching others is like playing a flute. A flute that is solid produces only hot air, a hollow flute. When placed to your lips, echoes. Before you teach others emptiness, have you yourself become empty?" The question brought him back to the beginning. A bamboo does not stand because it is dense, but because it is hollow within. He resolved to go an entire day without speaking, only doing. That morning passed in quiet peace. By noon, a novice dropped a bowl, and the sound of shattering spread like a pebble in water. It rippled out, stirring irritation in him. A scolding word formed on his tongue but dissolved into a long breath. He knelt to gather each fragment with the boy and realized the fear in the boy's eyes was one he had known himself. In silence, compassion emerged. In the afternoon, a neighbor rushed to the temple gate seeking shelter from rain. He invited her inside, offering tea. As the tea flowed through the earthen kettle, its murmur reminded him, the tea needs a hollow path. Like rain needs the edge of a roof to fall. Like words need silence to be heard. A seasonal storm struck one night, lashing the bamboo forest. The stalks clacked and scraped, nearly breaking, yet come morning, the grove still stood. Perhaps a few boughs lay broken, a few leaves tattered. He walked along the forest edge, hand brushing the scratched stalks. Bamboo survives not because it is rigid, but because it bows, not because it is full, but because it makes room for wind to pass, not because it is thick, but because it is hollow in just the right measure. In that moment, he grasped another layer of meaning. Emptiness does not mean emptiness for its own sake. Emptiness is the structure of living. A dense bamboo will rot from within. A person clogged with self will snap in the first wind. From then on, whenever pride stirred, he would ask himself, which part of me is solid? Which part has not allowed the wind to pass through? One afternoon during communal work, the monks built temporary bamboo channels to irrigate the terrace fields. As water would trickle into one end, it rushed out the other side in vibrant arcs. A novice cheered. "Great, bamboo really makes clever plumbing." The elder monk shook his head quietly. "It is not that bamboo makes. It is that bamboo is. Bamboo is simply bamboo, and because it is hollow, water chooses it." Standing there, he felt a small realization click into place. He had wasted so much energy trying to make enlightenment happen. Make silence grow deep, make depth. Yet the way comes naturally once one lets oneself become hollow. He sat on the terrace edge and dipped his hand into the cold water. The water flowed between his fingers, ungrasping, unresisting, unseeking. A hollow hand lets water pass, a clenched one only holds wetness. That evening, He shared his scattered insights with the master, who sat listening beneath the frame of a window like a crescent moon. Before he could deliver a conclusion, the master said gently, "Stop naming." The student paused. "Each time you name, you solidify. Let bamboo be bamboo. Let wind be wind. Let emptiness be emptiness." The words unsettled him. He had long thought habitually in terms, concepts, labels. That night, he sat doing nothing but sitting, trying nothing but trying, just watching his breath, just listening. Thoughts drifted in like stubborn clouds. But this time he did not chase them away. He let them pass like wind through bamboo, ephemeral, murmuring, fleeting, then gone. There were days of regression, like sudden cold rain. Once while cooking, a younger monk oversalted the soup. The rebuke sprang to his lips. But he stopped himself, noting the hardening inside as though a grain of salt had lodged in his chest. He poured fresh water, tasted the soup, nodded that it was fine, and offered a silent smile of apology. The bowl remained the same bowl, and his heart had lost but one grain of solidity. Another day, a stranger came and asked sharply testing questions intended to unsettle the temple. He felt the urge rise to show off his knowledge, but he remembered the sound of the bamboo staff against the ground that day, and simply replied, "Please have some tea." When the water finished pouring, the sound of teacup against table spoke the rest. Autumn returned with golden light like a delicate coat of honey spilled over the wooden corridor. He was assigned to split thick bamboo into flutes for the village children. Carving, hollowing, shaping, all the process required the perfect measure of emptiness. Too deep a bore, the flute sounded hoarse. Too shallow, it was mute. A misaligned hole made harsh tones. One small error ruined the voice entirely. He brought the flute to his lips and played. The first note was clumsy, the second hesitant, but by the 10th, he released a clear, resonant song. He set it down and realized it was not his skill, but that he had stopped striving. His lips relaxed. Breath let go. His tongue did not intervene, and the sound flowed itself. He sat long with the tiny hollow in the bamboo, thinking of his own body, of emptiness between words, of the space between thoughts in that space. Sound could arise. One late afternoon, as the year was drawing to a close, there was a funeral in a village at the base of the mountain. A few monks were sent from the temple to offer support. I brought along a handful of flutes for the children, who were huddled in the courtyard, clearly frightened. Inside the house, the sound of mourning filled the air. Outside, the wind whispered, and in between, the unsure notes of the children's flutes slowly emerged. An elderly woman looked at me and said, "Please play more, Master." To ease the children's fear, I lifted one of the flutes, not to perform, but to breathe through it 3 long, steady tones, like taking 3 even breaths. The delicate sounds floated onto the straw roof, drifted across the wooden porch, and brushed against the edges of the white mourning cloth, smoothing the sharpness of grief. On my way back home, I realized something deeper. Emptiness does not erase suffering. Emptiness simply means we do not add another layer of self onto the pain. Let suffering move through you the way wind moves through bamboo. Do not hold it. And do not let it shatter the forest. One evening, as the seasons shifted and the cold wind began to stir, I stepped into the storage hut and found a bundle of young bamboo stalks snapped in half. Someone had stacked them too tightly. I held them in my hands and looked inside at their smooth green hollows. The emptiness of young bamboo is different from that of old bamboo. One is soft because it has not yet matured. The other is supple because it has endured many seasons. I smiled and thought to myself, I want to be like old bamboo. But my heart still feels like a young sprout. I set the bundle down and stepped out onto the porch. My teacher was already sitting there. His gaze turned outward. Without saying a word, he gently tapped the wooden railing beside him. A soft, hollow sound echoed. A brief note that captured the meeting of hand and wood. Sound and silence. Teacher and student. I pressed my palms together, bowed my head, and stood still until the wind shifted direction. From that day forward, I found myself craving praise a little less, fearing criticism a little less, no longer chasing after new teachings, and loosening my grip on old ones. Whenever someone asked, "What is an empty mind?" I would not lecture. I would take them to the bamboo grove, stand in silence, and let them listen to the wind. If they insisted on words, I would tell them the story of the flute. If they still did not understand, I would pour them a cup of tea. And if they kept asking, I would simply smile and say, "Drink, do not name." On rare nights when I was alone, I would place my hand over my chest and listen for the space between heartbeats, a space as thin as a strand of hair, yet undeniably there, as delicate as a spider's silk, yet unbreakable, as small as a flute hole, yet enough for a melody to pass through. I know I am still not old bamboo, but each day I become a little less heavy, a little lighter, a little less full of myself, and in that quiet lightness, the wind finds its way through. Zen reference. Two monks and a woman. This deeply resonant moment echoes a well-known Zen story told across many traditions. An older monk and a younger monk came to a river and saw a young woman unable to cross. Seeing her distress, the older monk gently picked her up, carried her across, and then set her down. Sometime later, the younger monk protested, "Brother, our rules forbid contact with women." The elder monk replied calmly, "I set her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This brief exchange shows how we often keep carrying burdens long after the moment has passed. The older monk responded with compassion, without clinging, but the younger monk continued to carry the weight in his mind. The teaching here is simple. When something has passed, let it go. Do not let old thoughts and regrets weigh you down. You lie down and turn toward the window. Out there, the stars still hang. Night is still night. The insect sounds hardly different from that moment before. Only one thing has changed. The invisible pack on your back has lightened. As if someone has quietly removed some fragments of rock, you close your eyes and breathe slowly, with each exhale. The teacher's words become thinner, not because you've forgotten, but because those words are no longer an arrow lodged in your chest, but rather a small lamp placed on the window ledge of memory. It's light enough to see other things. Just before falling asleep, you see yourself standing at the midday stream's edge, there. The teacher puts the young woman down, bows, picks up the bag, and turns away. In your dream, you also bow. Take the invisible pack off your shoulder. Set it down among the silver grass, and hear it touch the ground without a sound. In the morning, thin mist fills the air. The villagers have covered the charcoal brazier. Smoke still lingers in your hair. The teacher and you take your leave and walk uphill. The path from yesterday is still the path today, only the muddy bank's surface has dried. And the trickle has receded a notch when you reach the stream's bank. You pause mid-stride, look down into the clearer water, in it. The teacher's reflection stretches and then breaks apart in a small ripple. You bend to pluck a damp blade of grass clinging to a stone and lay it on the bank. That small, trivial gesture suddenly makes your back feel lighter. You wade across. The water reaches your ankles. Pleasantly cold, you step slowly, placing your foot where you already know. When you reach the other side, you look back at the silver grass, as if greeting something left behind. On the whole journey, the teacher says nothing of the matter again. He asks about the young rice, about the birds returned to their nests, about whether the wind has changed. Your answers come softly, voice lowered. Inside, the story continues on another rhythm. It turns out that letting go of the past is not denying what happened. The teacher did carry the young woman across the stream and you witnessed it, but rather ceasing to carry your attachments toward it. Judgment, defensiveness, the self-righteous, I keep better discipline. Somehow you hear something soft in your steps, the sound of a knot undone. Arriving at the temple gate, the wind chime rattles softly. The teacher hangs his bag, washes his hands with rainwater from a jar, washing very slowly. Scoop, pour, rub, rinse, then place the ladle on the rim of the jar. These motions are like a silent chant. You fetch a broom to sweep the porch. With each stroke you brush away a few fallen leaves and a trace of yesterday's feeling from your mind. In that moment of calm, you suddenly think, the stream's edge is everywhere, on the lip of a bowl, on the broom's edge, beneath the peel knife under the bark, and the invisible pack always wants to leap back onto the shoulder. Each time you notice it, just smile, set it down, and keep going. After that night when you heard the words, I put her down long ago, but you were still carrying, you began seeing around you all the unnamed invisible burdens you had long been carrying. Your siblings frown over a salty bowl of soup, carried. A stranger's small critique, carried. A look that seemed to pierce through your shirt, carried. A stale memory of someone misunderstanding you, carried. Even a positive thought about yourself climbs onto your back like a well-fed cat. Heavy but soft, so that after 10 steps your hips begin to ache. You try a game, each morning. After the bell, you ask yourself, what is on my back today? And walk the whole day seeing whether your pack fills or lightens. Strangely, on days you speak little, do the work in front of you. Smile with your eyes. The pack is as light as straw. On days you try to be more correct, purer, more understanding. The pack grows heavier from that very desire. Once, when sweeping the courtyard, an elderly vegetable seller stops at the gate to rest. You pour her a cup of water. She tells of her drunk son in a harsh, helpless tone. You listen, nodding and cursing, yes. But inside your chest a silent judgment arises. If only you had taught him better. As the thought forms, your shoulders slump as if a stone was added. You realize this. Invite her to sit longer. Silently watch her weathered hands, letting the judgment pass like clouds across the mountain's peak, before the third sentence even forms. Your shoulders lighten again, as if someone removed the rock. Another time, A little novice breaks the rainwater jar with a sharp crash like a thorn stabbing your ear. The whole courtyard startles. The child turns pale and tearful. You step forward, prepared commands poised on your tongue. When you notice your back already carries the disciplinary burden, you put it down with a single breath. Gingerly pick up a large shard. Say, "Stand still so you won't cut your foot." Then take the broom and shovel. Your hands working while your mouth stays silent. Your breathing audible. After cleaning, you scoop water to rinse the floor. Tilt another jar to pour water over it, muttering, "This jar carries the other," for a moment. Then laugh at yourself. It turns out it's not only people carrying people. Water carries water. Wind carries the smell of flowers. Clouds carry sunlight. Bells carry air. And we carry things already done. Like bearing a shadow. That night, you tell the teacher. He only asks, when you picked up the shard, "What were you carrying?" "I didn't think. I just picked it up." Then that's light. The teacher neither praises nor lectures. He simply taps chopsticks on the rim of the bowl, a thin but clear sound, seeming to drive a tiny nail into the wood of your memory. Some days, the pack climbs onto you without your noticing. A man passes through the gate, glances at you with a sneer. By evening you realize he's a merchant once rejected at the temple. The sneer lingers behind your neck like a tiny mosquito. Everything you do you hear it buzzing. At night you sit still and call that sneer by name. Little bump of anger. Inviting it to sit in front of you as if to have tea. You stare at it. It has nothing to cling to anymore. Just a fleeting curve. In a moment it fades like ink in sunlight. You exhale, feeling the pack drop inside you, with no one needed to pick it up. The flood season comes early. Rain pours for 3 days. The small stream becomes fierce. The field banks churned like porridge. Word comes from the lower village. The road is slippery. The bamboo bridge tilted. A young mother holding her baby stands waiting for someone to cross. The teacher looks at the sky, dons his raincoat, says, "Go." At last year's stream crossing. Water is nearly knee-high. Murky, the mother stands trembling. The baby clings to her neck, eyes wide like young longans, without time to ask. The teacher signals, picks up the baby first, hands the child to you to hold to your chest, then turns back to support the mother. The three of you move as one pulse. The water lashes your thighs like whips. The teacher steps cautiously, breath steady, eyes scanning stones above and below the water, on the far bank. He sets the mother down, says, "Sit," smooths his garment's hem, brushes mud from his sandals, then faces the baby in your arms. Heavy, you shake your head, strangely. Though the child is heavy, your heart is light. No pack climbed onto your back. The sequence of movements was like a string of beads slipping through your fingers, done before they could rest on you. The mother weeps, her voice finding broken bits of, "Thank you." The teacher nods, gently pushes her, "Go home, before it gets cold," then looks back at the water's edge, as if checking for others. There are none. So he turns away, on the muddy path. You walk beside him, feeling an odd sensation as if, though you cannot recall any words, someone has just taught you a wordless mantra. Do what needs doing and set it down immediately. Why today did nothing catch me? You ask yourself in your mind. The wind answers by wheeling damp freshness into your lungs. The teacher answers by not answering. That night, You sit before the porch, watching the rains end at the horizon, remembering the stream's bank from last year, the one today, remembering the young woman, and the mother, remembering the invisible pack then, and the undone carrying now. Suddenly you understand another layer. True peace is not carrying, it is carrying and setting down immediately. False peace is merely avoiding water out of fear of getting dirty. The teacher does not avoid. He walks straight through water as one crosses a room, clean or dirty as the garment's concern, light or heavy as the heart's. You clasp your hands, bow your head toward the teacher's room. Even though nothing is spoken, in the stillness, you think you hear the raincoat hung at the porch corner dripping, counting the night's rhythm drop by drop. The next day, my teacher told me to bring rice into the hamlet where a house had just been dismantled. The dirt road was sticky. The wheels groaned. I pushed the cart, sweat blending with rain as it fell. I felt each drop slide across the back of my hand like a word saying, "Put down." When I arrived at that house, the one-armed man greeted me with a crooked smile. I suddenly remembered how he argued when last reminded to keep things clean. The memory sprang up like a thorn. I hoisted my load again, about to climb. Then I realized, bringing the sack of rice into the corner of the kitchen. Sitting down to sip a bowl of hot water, he awkwardly thanked me, his remaining hand trembling. The thorn vanished. I left, my back dry as if I had carried nothing. In early winter, the teacher was often tired, a dry cough, walking slower, sunlight as thin as a sheet of paper lining the damp steps. The students carried water, chopped wood, cooked porridge, learned to wash dishes without sound, shut the door without slamming so as not to let in drafts, stepped past the teacher's bed without letting their shadow block the light. Every act became a lesson in not carrying more, not carrying extra worry into the morning, not carrying extra fear into the coughing, not carrying the past, how healthy the teacher once was, not carrying the future, what will happen next. One evening, the teacher called me closer to the window. A crescent moon hung in the sky. Bamboo outside rustled with one thin cord. The teacher spoke, his voice like someone placing a leaf on water. "This old back is about to put down." Then he fell silent. I bit my lip. "Do not," arose from my sternum. But behind that, "do not," I heard, "put down," spread like ripples. The teacher looked at me, squinted and smiled. "You remember the stream bank, right?" I nodded. "If you carry, you carry. If you put down, you put down, when the time comes." The body too is someone crossing the stream. A simple phrase like a rope anchored the burning cold wind in my chest. In the days that followed, the teacher ate less, slept more, spoke less. Sometimes he would raise his hand like to point at the moon, but not to anything. I sat nearby, tending the warm stove, smoothing his blanket's folds. One afternoon the teacher said, "Take me to the veranda." I helped him sit. His back rested on a pillow. His eyes met the sky. The breeze carried the scent of fresh straw. A butterfly drifted by. The teacher breathed lightly, said, "Put down," as if murmuring to his own body. His hand released. His chin relaxed. His palm opened like the far bank. I placed my hand on my chest, felt my heart beat gently like tiny knocks on water. There were tears, but no burden. Sadness passed through me like a cloud shaped like a person. I didn't cling. The funeral was simple. People from the village below came. Children held bamboo flutes and played 3 equal notes, each sustained evenly, like the 3 breaths the teacher often instructed. The bell tolled, the wind passed, bamboo swayed. The ashes were as light as a pampas grass plume. I carried the urn of ashes as though lifting a void, in that void. The teacher was not absent, he was not in warmth, not in the bed, not in the walking stick. He was in the place where I had just put down the heaviest invisible load of my life. Without making any sound, after that day, visitors to the pagoda heard the story of the teacher carrying the girl across the stream. But I did not recount it with excitement, I only said, when needed. Do, once done, put it down, if one has carried. Then put down as soon as one remembers. When someone asked, "How do you remember?" I brought them to the stream bank. The water still flows. The stones still lie. The reeds still bow. I said, "Stand here for a moment," to the impatient one. I poured tea, to the doubtful one. I told the story of the burden, to the one seeking a formula. I played those 3 flute notes, sometimes. I remained silent, silence. If it is not carried as a show, is the teacher. One day, the pagoda was crowded with visitors. People offering incense filled the veranda, voices chatting. The sound of wooden sandals, spoons clinking, children laughing. In all that chaos, I felt dizzy, restless, like being lost in a marketplace. At that exact moment, a gust of wind blew in from the front yard, the bell tongue swayed. The sound rang out, touched the roof, touched the pillars, and touched the chaos. I froze. 1 breath in, 1 breath out, and everything was still noisy. But no longer chaotic. I realized. The bell did not silence the crowd, it only quieted the crowd within me. Dwelling in the present moment does not mean finding a place without noise. It means standing right in the noise without adding your own. One day, the wind was fierce. Dark clouds gathered atop the mountain like a herd of buffalo lying down. Distant thunder calling back and forth. Trees in the yard bent wildly. Leaves flying in diagonal streaks. The bell no longer rang sparsely but pounded sharply. Like someone knocking urgently at the door. My heart was pounding too. The Zen master called a few of us over. Told us to fasten the bell ropes and wedge extra wooden cushions to prevent it from banging too hard. I climbed up to the veranda, my hands trembling from the cold wind. As I placed the final wedge, the teacher looked at me, pointed at my chest. "There's also a bell in here. Do not let the outer wind break the inner bell." That night, I lay listening to my heart. Not as steady as the bell in the tower. But it had rhythm, it had silence, it had a beginning, it had an end. I smiled, realizing for the first time that I did not have to wait for the wind. I could ring the bell with my breath. News from home came through an old friend. My father was seriously ill. The sparse words on the paper landed on the table like pieces of lead. I held the letter. My eyes stopped at a period. Then a comma. My throat went dry. Everything fell silent for a moment. Then waves surged. In the waves, I heard a small but familiar sound. The bell in the tower. Just as a thin breeze passed through. I stood up, walked out to the veranda. 1 bell, 2 bells, 3 bells. Breath in, breath out. Father is sick. Inhale. Noted. Exhale. Worried, inhale. Noted, exhale. Not to drown out the worry, just to give it a place to stand. The waves did not vanish immediately, but they no longer threatened to swallow me. I went to the teacher's room. He was already sitting. I handed him the letter. He nodded, asked, "Do you want to go home?" I bit my lip. "I do. But I am also afraid." The teacher asked, "Afraid of what?" I said, "Afraid I won't make it in time." He exhaled slowly. No one ever catches up with impermanence. We can only catch up with now. I fell silent. The teacher handed me a small bronze bell, old and warm in the hand. "Take this with you. When you do not know what to do, ring it once. Do not make decisions while the wind is still blowing." The path down the mountain felt longer than ever. As I walked, the bell in my pocket brushed against my side, not ringing, just reminding. Past the rice paddies, over a rickety bamboo bridge, past a roadside tea shop with the familiar scent of green tea. Whenever fear surged up, I touched the bell without ringing it, breath in, breath out. When I got home, my father had passed the worst of it. Lying there wheezing, I sat beside him, placed my hand over the back of his thin, darkened hand. My mother looked at me and gave a tired smile. "You made it in time." I wanted to cry. The bell in my pocket remained silent. My heart beat out the bell's rhythm. The kitchen fire crackled. The straw whispered its ordinary song. During the days at home, I woke early to mix medicine, wipe his body, adjust blankets, go to the market, greet the neighbors. The pagoda's tower bell was too far to hear. The bell I carried rarely rang, but whenever my back ached, my head tensed, or worry rose, I breathed in like I did that day at the pagoda, and breathed out like I did that day beneath the eaves. Nothing mystical. The smell of boiled herbs, the smell of sweat, the aroma of fresh rice porridge, the creaking of an old bicycle passing the alley, and a thin silence between two tasks. On the third night, my father opened his eyes, said a few broken words. "It does not hurt much, do not worry too much, live lightly." Then he fell asleep. I sat by the door. The sky turned misty. Somewhere, someone rang a bell, not the pagoda bell. Maybe a wind chime from a neighbor's house. The sound was light, not deep like the tower bell, but enough to make me smile. As long as the wind remains, the bell remains. A week later, I took my father to the district clinic. The doctor said he was stable for now. I returned to the pagoda. The teacher looked at me longer than usual, did not ask, did not explain, just poured tea. I told the story without telling. The two of us sat. The tea ran out. Silence. When I stood to leave, he gently touched the small bell I had brought. "Good. But remember, the bell is a friend, not a charm. When there is no bell, you still have now." Spring came quickly. One morning, the trees on the hill suddenly turned a deep green all at once. By the well's edge were soft moss patches like baby skin. Villagers carried flowers and cakes up to the pagoda. The courtyard was noisy but joyful. The bell rang often. Drums from festivals sometimes intruded like a playful child. I helped clean up, carried trays, smiled until my cheeks ached. In the crowd, I discovered a new habit. Whenever I was about to be swept away in chatter, one half of my ear tuned itself to the wind, not to escape the crowd, but so I would not drift away from where my feet were planted. Sometimes, there was no wind, I heard my own footsteps, that was enough. One windy noon, a strong gust snapped the old bell rope loose. The tongue struck the bell's side with a harsh clang. Then silence. The novices rushed over in a panic. I reached out, grabbed the rope, held the striker still. My palm grew hot from the friction. The Zen master came, watched, but did not rush to tie it. Instead, he tapped the bell gently with his fingertip. A faint tone echoed. He said, "There are many ways for a bell to ring. If there is no wind, use your hand. If there is no hand, use your mind." I did not fully understand, but in his words I sensed a way out for windless days. That night, I sat in my room, outside. Rain fell in a soft drizzle. I placed the small bell on the table. Did not ring it, instead. I tapped the tabletop with my fingernail. The sound was different. But I could choose the rhythm. I breathed in with the rhythm. The cat in the corner lifted its head, then closed its eyes again. I laughed softly. So it turns out, the bell is just a name for a reminder. Come home. Home is not a wooden house. Home is where the breath touches the ground. Summer. The sun stood high like someone refusing to sit. The courtyard blazed bright. The bell tower was hot, cracking faintly to the touch. The wind was rare, the bell quiet. I worked in the garden, salty with sweat, my back muddy in that sticky heat. The mind was quick to anger. A young novice carelessly broke a tender squash sprout. I nearly lashed out. Right then, a sparrow flapped its wings off the rooftop. The sound of wings small like a folding paper fan closing, not a bell, but a sound, enough for me to breathe in. The harsh words turned into a reminder. Do not break it next time. The boy pressed his lips, nodded. I turned back to the garden bed, saw white sap glistening on the broken sprout. Like a drop of milk, I bent down to replant it. Pulled soil to cover the roots. Whispered, "I am sorry." Not sure to whom. The village below invited us down to help set up a temporary storm shelter for the schoolyard. The grown-ups all tried to talk over each other. The children ran all over. The sounds of hammers, saws, people calling, trucks unloading wood, a market of sounds. I stood in the middle of it all, and after a moment felt dizzy, heart racing. Then, as if a self-taught miracle, I placed my hand on my chest, breathed in, a bell in my heart, breathed out, another bell in that rhythm. The market was still the market, but I was no longer being swallowed by it. An old man passing by paused, nodded. This boy knows how to rest in the middle of a market. I smiled. Without explaining, I am listening to the bell in my wind. At the end of summer, a long storm broke out, bringing 2 or 3 days of relentless heavy rain. The temple bell sounded mournfully like an old ox groaning. The villagers lost a wooden bridge and requested help from the temple. I went down with a few novices. The water was muddy and rushing fast. Amid the roar of the water, I heard something else, very subtle. A child was crying, carried in its mother's arms, her body trembling. I did not hear the bell. I heard the voice of, now, tying ropes, driving stakes, laying a temporary plank. When my foot stepped onto the wet plank, my heart hammered loudly. I gritted my teeth, breathing with its rhythm. 1, 2, 3 steps. I made it to the other side, turned around, lifted the child, It fell silent the moment its head touched the wet shoulder of my robe. Its head rested at the spot of my heart. It slept. Our hearts aligned in sync. Wind whispered somewhere, in the rain. Was there a bell someone struck? Maybe it was only my hearing imagining it. That was fine. I smiled, and did not need certainty. Years passed. I grew less childlike in my walk, but preserved a childlike wonder in how I noticed. People from the village came to ask, "Teacher, I worry a lot. When I hear the bell, I'm calm for a moment. But then worry returns. How do I stop it completely?" I shook my head, smiling. To stop completely means not being human anymore. But each time worry arrives, I ring a bell, not to chase the worry away, but to remember I am worrying. In remembering, the worry shrinks. They frowned. That's too hard. I poured tea. Drink it. Practice drinking a cup of tea and only drinking. In that moment, the bell is not in the tower. Some understood immediately. Some did not. Some returned home and hung a wind chime on their porch. Each time they passed in their hand brushing it. They complained. "It rings all the time, it's tiring." I said, "A crying child is tiring too. But if you see the sound not as annoyance, but as a reminder, it changes." An old woman said, "I sleep poorly. Hearing a bell wakes me." I taught her to ring a bell in her mind with a simple verse. Bell rings, come home. Bell fades, stay home. She grinned without teeth. Done. Home. No longer wandering. A young man who often drank came to see me. Red-eyed and trembling. He said, "Whenever I become afraid, I drink. After drinking, fear returns twice as strong." I did not urge him to quit right away. I gave him a small bell wrapped in cloth and said, "When you feel like drinking, strike it 3 times first. If after 3 rings you still wish to drink, then drink slowly." A month later, he returned and said, "One evening I rang it 10 times, completely forgot to drink." I did not praise or preach. I said, "Good. But the bell does not save you. You remembering yourself does." He bowed his head and cried softly, like dew falling. One autumn afternoon, the Zen master called me up to the bell tower. The sky was clear and the wind just right. He placed his hand upon the bell and closed his eyes. After a long silence, he opened them and asked, "What do you hear?" I replied, "The wind touching the bell." He asked, "And what else?" I said, "Silence." He nodded. "And anything else?" I looked at him, then looked down at the courtyard. "I hear myself living." The master smiled faintly. "That's enough for today." The master aged quickly, like wind changing seasons. One morning, he did not come out into the courtyard. I entered his room and saw him leaning, eyes closed, breathing faintly. I sat beside him, saying nothing. On the table lay the small bell I had brought down to our home the previous month. I picked it up, intending to ring it, then I placed it down. I listened to my heart. I felt the master's heart, not clearly, but sensed through the skin. In that stillness emerged a long ring of a bell. Though no one struck, I wept without sound. After a moment, the master opened his eyes and whispered, "You listen well." Then he slept. In the afternoon, wind drifted across the eaves, and the tower bell told 3 very clear tones. I stood on the threshold. My heart emptied like a room just cleaned. Not sad. Sadness was there, not gone. Loss was there. But above all was a brightness in the void. The day the master passed away, many villagers came up. The tower bell tolled long and slow. I struck the small bell 3 times, as I had taught the children. No one cried out loud. There were sniffs and sighs. I placed my hand upon the large bell and felt its coolness. Put it down, I reminded myself, and the bell sounded once more. Crisp. After the ceremony, I did not tell lofty stories. I said, "The master taught me, when wind blows, the bell rings, when wind fades, the bell still remains, whether someone lives or leaves. Now still stays." Some nodded, some did not. The wind passed through all. In the second week, the teacher called an up to the veranda. A few early almond leaves had fallen, drifting down like small hands gently opening. The stone lay at the foot of the steps, blackened handprints on it like marks on a creature that had been petted too much. The teacher sat cross-legged and asked, "What have you learned from the stone?" And did not have to think. Patience. "Master, I realized that as long as I do not give up, no matter how heavy it is, I will get used to it." The teacher nodded. Getting used to it is one thing. Then he reached out and tapped the stone lightly. A dry clack rang out and ended immediately. "What else?" And fell silent. The teacher said, "Put it down and pick it back up, you hear its sound. But carry it endlessly, and even the sound disappears. Some things only appear when you know how to let go." And swallowed, his back stiffening a little more. He wanted to say something about diligence, about endurance, about seeing it through. But those words in his mouth suddenly felt as heavy as the stone itself. "Keep carrying it," the teacher said. "When you feel it has taught you all it can, return it to the stream." From that moment, the stone officially became part of N's practice. He even wrapped it in an old cloth to avoid scratching the tiles. In the morning he placed it under the sun, at noon. Pulled it into the shade, at night. Kept it beside his bed like a secret-keeping companion. Sometimes he laid his hand on the cold surface, feeling the chill move through his skin, through his veins, all the way to his back. He thought, "This is the weight of life. I must endure it to rise above it." He began to count rhythms, every 50 steps. He would set it down once during work. He paused mid-task to give it a stroke, every evening. He lifted it 10 times. Like doing pull-ups. Those nice numbers helped him feel less adrift. Like planting signposts in an empty field. But the body does not lie. In the third week, pain shot through N's right shoulder, as if someone had stabbed a short chopstick into the joint. He hid it, afraid the teacher would make him stop. That morning, while sweeping the courtyard, he used his left hand to hold the stone, letting the right one hang loose. Afterward, while rinsing a wash basin, the splash of cold water on his skin eased the ache a little. At noon, he hugged it with his right arm again, like coaxing a stubborn child. "Come on now. Do not make me look weak." That evening, as N counted, 9, 10, the Zen master passed by. He said nothing, just stood listening to the steady sound of stone meeting tile. At the 11th rep, N set it down and looked up. The teacher asked quietly, "Are you carrying the stone? Or is the stone carrying you?" The question dropped into N's ears like a pebble falling into a deep well. The echo rose slowly and could not be shaped into words. He stammered, "Master, I am strengthening my spirit." The teacher did not argue. "Tomorrow, come gather medicine on the western slope with me," he said. "Bring the stone." The path up the western peak was long and steep. In the early morning, clouds hung across the mountain's waist like a silk scarf, and carried the stone, and the teacher, a bamboo basket. When they reached a steep, slick incline covered in jagged rocks, and foot slipped, the stone slammed into his chest, and he fell forward, breath knocked out. The teacher turned, did not help him up, but gently moved the stone aside. "Stand up," he said, voice calm, and groped at the ground. His fingers slipped in mud, then caught a root. He pulled himself up, throat burning. The teacher looked him straight in the eyes. "Here, you do not need the stone. And in many parts of life, you won't either." Then he returned the stone to him, as one might return a cherished item that cannot be used. "Let's go." They arrived at a rocky ledge overlooking the valley. The wind rose, bringing scents of pine resin and damp soil. The teacher sat down and opened the basket to sort herbs, and placed the stone beside him. Sat cross-legged, hugging his knees. The teacher asked, "Are you sure the weight of the stone lies in your hands? Or in your mind?" And wanted to say, "My hands," it was obvious, but the words caught in his throat. He looked at the stone. From here, it was just a gray mass with a thread of moss. Peaceful, without purpose, but in his mind, the stone had a name, a role, mantra, evidence, certificate, and a whole story. "I persevered. I am strong. I am different." The real stone was lighter than what the stone inside his head demanded, and suddenly felt exhausted, not muscle exhaustion, but a weariness from the words, "I," that had just surfaced. The teacher continued, "No one forbids you from carrying a stone. But if you carry it to prove something, you will also have to carry the one proving it. That is twice the weight." And smiled weakly. The teacher pointed down at the silver stream curling around the foot of the mountain. "When the lesson feels complete, take it back to the water. Do not throw. Let it go." That afternoon, back at the temple, and placed the stone next to the steps as usual, but no longer sat on it. He sat farther away, watching it like a friend with whom he had grown too familiar. That night, he could not sleep. The insects outside tapped out a tiny rhythm like needle pricks. He turned, his shoulder ached again. He reached out to touch the stone, cold, and pulled his hand back. In the dark, he whispered, "What do you want from me?" The stone, of course, said nothing, but that question allowed him to hear another voice, the voice of what had clung to the stone to survive, ambition. It did not scream, it spoke softly, "Without me, you are just like everyone else. Without me, who will know you are diligent? Without me, you will fade into the crowd. Become small." He chuckled quietly in the dark. "So what? What if I am small?" Ambition replied instantly, "You are afraid." He fell silent. A very clean, very real fear rose from his sternum. The fear of not being special, of disappearing into the ordinary, of no one saying his name. He turned to the wall and breathed. The stone remained quiet, like the moon hidden behind clouds. The next morning, and carried the stone to the stream. The water was clear and cool, the stone's surface glinting with mica in the sunlight. He squatted on a flat rock, placed the stone on his lap. "Do not throw. Let it go." The teacher's words surfaced. Throwing is a dramatic gesture. Letting go, on the other hand, is such an ordinary act that it becomes difficult, because it does not leave the ego with a scene to remember. Slowly, and leaned forward and brought the stone close to the water. In that moment, A part of his ambition kicked up one last time. Wait. If you let go, it is like surrendering. And if you grow weak later, who will accept the blame? And suddenly laughed, a small, honest laugh. I am not letting go of strength. I am letting go of the need to prove I am strong. As he said that, his hand opened on its own. The stone hit the water with a soft plop and sank quickly. The water returned to stillness instantly, leaving only a few ripples, which spread outward, touched a few other stones, then disappeared as though nothing had happened, and sat still, feeling his right shoulder warm up, then cooled down. He felt an emptiness opening across his back, not from loss, but from no longer having to hold. He bent down to wash his face. The water salty with sweat, he reached into the spot where the stone had stirred, touched a smooth pebble, then drew his hand back. No spectacle, just a lightness. On the way home, white clouds gathered into the shape of a giant fish swimming against the wind. He walked slowly. His steps no longer tried to echo on the brick path. Each step sounded like a quiet, enough. At the gate, a little novice ran up. "Brother in, where's the stone?" and patted his head. It swam back to the stream. "The stone knows how to swim." The boy's eyes widened. Yes, when the person holding it knows how to let go. That afternoon, and swept the yard. The wind lifted piles of leaves into small brown clouds and let them fall back into corners. Anne's back was straight without trying. Each stroke of the broom fell evenly. Uncounted. The Zen master passed by. Did not look. Simply picked up a single green leaf. Held it in his palm. Blew gently. The leaf trembled. Then stilled in his hand. The teacher placed it on the step and continued walking. No praise. No Dharma talk. But somewhere inside Anne, a quiet sentence rose. I did not let go of the stone to prove I let go. I let go because I no longer needed it. The monastery rests atop an elevated sandbank, right above a quiet shoreline. Each morning, the sun rises from the horizon like a slow copper coin, tinting the moss-covered tiles with a thin layer of honey. The breeze carries the saltiness of the sea. The saffron robes flutter like palm leaves. Min, the youngest postulant in the temple, often woke before the bell, carried water to the rear courtyard, swept the grounds, and then stood at the edge of the rock embankment, watching the waves beat endlessly. From the moment he entered the monastery, Min carried an unspoken fear that he was too small, that his life was meaningless, that he would dissolve into the crowd like a bubble. Every time he gazed at the sea, that fear tightened. Countless ripples folded into each other, none keeping its shape beyond a single breath. What if I am only a ripple? Min murmured, his heart constricting. One morning, the Zen master summoned Min into his cell. He said nothing but handed him a small earthen bowl and said, "Go to the sea, scoop a bowl of water, and care for it as you would your own self." Min obediently took it and ran to the water's edge. The beach was empty except for distant calls of seagulls. He scooped a full bowl. The water's surface rippled slightly, reflecting a patch of sky. He carried it back and placed it on a window sill, covering it with a swatch of screen to keep away the dust. It seemed like a child's task. Yet strangely, the bowl became something precious to him. Each day after sweeping, he checked the bowl. If evaporation lowered the water level, he refilled it. At noon under hot sun, he pulled it into the shade. At night, He uncovered it so the water could breathe. Once, when a grain of sand fell in, Min carefully lifted it out with a spoon. When an ant wandered onto the rim, he gently guided it away. Meanwhile, that old fear began to quieten, because at least his drop of water remained whole. A week later, the master called Min again. He laid a hand on the bowl and asked, "How is it?" Min smiled. "It is peaceful, Master. I keep it clean, never letting it diminish." The master nodded, then carried the bowl straight to the shore. Min panicked and ran after him. At the edge of the embankment, the master stopped and said, "Now return it to the sea." Min froze. "But I have cared for it," he stammered. "Because you cared for it," the master replied. "You know it is water." He offered the bowl back to Min. Hands trembling, Min lifted it. The ocean before him stretched wide as a giant doorway. The sky inverted in the bowl. "If I pour it away," a voice stirred within, "it will be lost." He stood, motionless, until the sea foam lapped his feet. The master did not hurry. He asked, "What is in the bowl?" "Water." "And out there?" "Water too." "Then what would be lost?" The breeze was fragrant, salt, seaweed, rock moss. Min stared down. The water mirrored his own hesitant eyes. In that moment, the master gently lifted the bowl and tilted it. A fine stream sloshed out with a soft thud, then vanished without trace. The bowl was empty. The sea was still. Min swallowed, both bereft and unburdened. "Did you hear it fall?" the master asked. "Yes." "Did you see it disappear?" Min didn't know what to answer. The master smiled. "It did not disappear, Min. It returned to its true name." That night, Min sat long on the veranda. The sea was a dark ribbon of wet silk. Waves beat evenly. Wind whispered evenly. He imagined that the drop from the bowl, if it could still be called a drop, was now somewhere under his feet. Or on the horizon, in a puddle reflecting moonlight? Or the faint salt on his lips? He brushed his tongue against his mouth and smiled softly. Its true name, the phrase echoed, like a dim light in his mind. The next day, the master gave Min 2 handfuls of salt. One he dropped into the bowl and stirred. Min tasted it, bracingly salty, lips curling. For the second handful, the master instructed him to go to the water's edge. Stir the salt into the rising wave in a shallow hollow with his hand. Then scoop and taste, still salty, but gentle, almost unperceivable. The master asked, "Is the salt different?" "Same." "Then why is one so sharp and the other soft?" Min replied, "Because one had little water and the other much more." The master nodded. "Exactly. Is your mind like the bowl? Or like the sea?" Min bowed. At that moment, he saw clearly. Fears, criticisms, doubting looks, when poured into a narrow self, they are sharp. When poured into something vast, they dissolve. From that day on, Min practiced expanding whenever he felt stuck. Once, he dropped a bowl and the shattering sound in the kitchen made him flinch. The thought, so clumsy, surged, but he paused and breathed as if before the sea. Letting the clumsy salt fall into a larger space than the bowl of "one must be good." It dissolved immediately. He picked up the shards, wiped the floor, washed his hands, and that was that. Another time a visitor sneered, "What does a little kid know?" Salt hit his throat. He sensed bitterness rise, then gazed past the person toward the distant sea. the salt faded. He smiled. I am still learning. Still, on windy, stormy nights when the waves foamed white, Min felt himself shrinking again to a drop of water, the urge to hold, to grip, to cover returned. He was weary. The master quietly came out, cloaked him and stood beside him. Not looking at Min, he said, "The sea can be rough. That's fine. Don't expect the sea to be still. Just remember, no matter how high the waves, water remains water." Min pressed his hand on the damp wooden railing and nodded faintly. Once the master sent Min into the mountains for herbs. On his return, rain tumbled down like sheets. The hill became slippery clay. Min shielded his basket, slipped, and sat down in the mud. He muttered, "So difficult," then laughed. Rain too comes from the sea. Rain pelted his face and neck. Water flowed along the ridge of his nose. Min inhaled deeply and smelled earth. Leaves. Rain, like the ocean of long ago. When he reached the temple, soaked as if drawn from the river, his herb basket dry, the master took the basket and silently handed him a towel. Min dried his hair and suddenly saw something simple, previously unseen. When a drop evaporates, it leaves the sea, but it does not vanish, it simply changes form. Cloud, rain, stream, river, well, sweat, tears, in each gate. It is still water. That night, Min dreamed lightly. He was a drop of water. The wind lifted him from the sea. He drifted through clouds. Soft as powder, he descended onto a rice field and soaked into the roots. He became breeze in a leaf. Sunlight rose and he rose. He became a raindrop on a child's smiling eye, then melted. Rolled to the child's lip. Returned to earth. He kept going. Everywhere he went he was. Never was he lost. One morning, the fishing village at the foot of the hill warned of an approaching storm. The monastery and villagers lashed boats and reinforced doors. Min joined the group, pulling ropes, carrying posts. The wind roared. Sand stung his ankles. A poor family's small boat was skewed by waves. A child clutched the prow crying. The father fumbled with rope. Min rushed. Joined him. Waves broke. Seawater reached his knees. In that brine, Min suddenly heard that old voice. Be careful of disappearing. He pursed his lips. The voice shrank until it was a tale too often told. No need to disappear. No need to show off. Min told himself. Just be water that pushes the boat ashore. 3 people, 4 hands, 1 rhythm, the boat secured firmly. The exhausted father clasped Min's hand. Thank you, young man. Min shook his head and pointed to the sea. The surface was black like a fish's back. The team moved on. The storm passed during the night. The next morning, the world looked fresh, like wiped clean. The sandbank was seams of algae and moss. Min visited the shore and saw a large tide pool enclosed by sand. Still like glass, a child was digging a tiny channel for the pool to flow back to sea. The channel was carved. Water hesitated, then trickled, then merged into the larger stream, and retained the same hue. Same scent. Same taste. Min sat beside the child in silence. The child looked up, grinning with missing teeth. It returned home. Min nodded. Yes, it returned home. One afternoon, the teacher stood on the embankment, watching the sails drift out to sea. Min joined him at his side and shared the story about the little channel the child had carved in the sand. The teacher said, "The human heart is the same. When it becomes a stagnant pool, everything that falls into it remains and rots, but if you open a channel, everything flows through, yet the water remains water." Min stayed silent. The teacher asked, "So, do you see yourself as a drop or the ocean?" Min answered, "I am water." The teacher smiled. Enough. From that moment, Min's desire to be special faded. He worked more quietly, seeking fewer praises. Strangely, the quieter he was, the more present he felt, in the clink of ladle against cooking pot, in the scent of brewing tea, in the rhythm of goats' hooves passing through the courtyard, in his own breath while carrying water up the slope. The fear of disappearing faded like a salt mark dissolving. In its place came a sense of belonging to the meal, to the herb basket, to the boat's mooring rope, to the sound of the night waves. Sometimes, sitting under the bell tower, he thought, if tomorrow he left the monastery, the sea would remain. If the sea drained away, even then, the clouds would stay. If clouds stopped moving, the dew would linger. If no dew, this breath would still be damp. So, what truly must disappear? One serene afternoon, Min again filled a bowl with water. He carried it to the embankment and sat a long while. He tilted the bowl and let water pour out. Tiny bubbles surfaced for a second, then vanished. Min closed his eyes and felt a salty gratitude flow in his chest. Thankful for the old fears that pushed him to the water's edge. Thankful for the bowl. Thankful for the sea. Thankful for his two hands. The laughing Zen master in the face of death. Story 10. In early winter, cold, needle-like breeze descended from the high mountain range. Ginkgo leaves had almost all fallen. Only a few thin golden ones clung stubbornly to the branches. In the small cottage on the west side of the temple, the teacher lay propped to the side, one hand resting gently on his abdomen, breathing short but steady. He had been ill for a long time. Each morning, his disciple changed the water in the vase, wiped the table, swept lightly beneath the bed. Each evening, he boiled bitter herbal medicine. Amid that rising herbal odor, a nameless fear weighed on him. Fear of the moment the teacher would leave. The emptiness that would open in the courtyard. The bell that might toll in the night without instruction. The teacher opened his eyes, looked at the disciple, and smiled. It was not a smile manufactured to ease worry, it was effortlessly natural. Like a small fire crackling in the hearth. The disciple asked, "Teacher, are you very weak?" The teacher answered, "My body is weak, but not my smile." The disciple lowered his head. Fumbling, the teacher pointed to the window and said, "Do you see the sky?" "Yes, teacher." "Does the sky collapse when a leaf falls?" The disciple shook his head. The teacher replied, "Then do not expect the sky to fall just because a leaf drops." He smiled again, thin as a wisp of smoke. That day, the teacher asked for a few small items: an aged wooden pipe darkened by time, a thin notebook bound with string, and a broken bamboo fan with a missing rib. The disciple was puzzled. "What for, teacher?" The teacher said, "To look back at old friends." He flipped through the notebook, a few stray lines of poetry, half-formed notes, ink smudged by raindrops. Then, he laughed quietly. The wind once blew away half a line. The disciple asked, "Do you regret it?" The teacher shook his head. If the verse was spoiled by rain, how could it help someone through the storm? With that, he gently closed the notebook and placed it beside his pillow, like placing a leaf back on the branch it belonged to. Illness deepened. The teacher ate less, slept more, his voice grew weak. Yet his eyes remained bright. Villagers visited, bringing honey, old ginger, and fragments of talk. They wore solemn faces, speaking in hushed tones. The teacher gestured to sit and told them the story of the temple cat that sneakily ate scraps, got trapped beneath the eaves, meowed as if moaning in distress. The teacher mimicked the cat's meow, and suddenly everyone burst into laughter. Laughter echoed through the corner, hit the wall, dropped onto the floor. Some visitors froze. Teacher is so frail, still joking? He waved them off. Smiling does not strengthen illness. And not smiling won't make death come later. Smile to see what is happening for what it is, not to cover it up. One rainy afternoon, the teacher sat up, leaned back on a pillow, and asked for the small hand bell. The disciple brought it. The teacher shook it lightly, a clear, brief note. Do you hear it? Yes. That means I am still alive. When tomorrow you don't hear it, something else will remain. What is that? Silence. The teacher closed his eyes, smiling as if he had just answered a riddle he had posed since youth. That night, as the disciple assisted the teacher in turning over, his hands trembled. The teacher gently pressed the disciple's hand. Are you afraid? Yes. Then know that you are afraid. Don't be afraid because you are afraid. The disciple said nothing. Outside, a breeze shifted direction, touching the low-hanging wind chime. A delicate note passed through the room, like a comma between two sentences. On the first Saturday after the season's first snow, the teacher called the disciple to sit close to the window. Soft white light streamed through the lattice. Fetch a pen, he said. The disciple opened the thin notebook and prepared ink. The teacher recited slowly, his voice breaking at times, flowing again at others. The breath of old returned. Sunshine sent to play. An empty bowl placed by the window. Who returns to pour the clouds today? He paused, waited, then grinned. Is pour the clouds today too sentimental? The disciple laughed through tears. No, teacher. Well then, sentiment is also sky. The teacher motioned for the disciple to add a short line. Laugh once. The disciple wrote it, the ink slightly smearing on the word, laugh. By midday, the teacher asked to be taken out to the ginkgo courtyard. It's cold, the disciple cautioned. Just know it's cold, the teacher replied. He sat on a low wooden stool. A brown blanket draped over him. Everyone stood in a distant circle. Wind blew and a few late leaves drifted down. Touching the teacher's hand, he looked at them and smiled. Your turn. Then he turned to the disciple. Remind everyone, do not carry me in your thoughts for more than 7 paces. 7, 5 is fine. 3 is best. A few chuckled. The teacher chuckled too, softly, like tapping fingertips on wood. He asked for the handbell again. This time he did not shake it, just placed it gently in his palm. Listen, he said, do not expect the sound, just know you are placing it. After a moment, he lifted his head. His eyes seemed to embrace the sky through the bare branches. I go now, he said calmly. Where to? Here. The words had not fully landed when his smile blossomed, deeper than any before. silent and effortless, like a door opening without hinges. His breath exhaled long, his shoulders relaxed. The bell in his palm resonated faintly, or perhaps it was someone's heart imagining it. Then silence. No one rushed into tears. A collective in-breath, simultaneous, as though they all remembered to keep breathing. The disciple placed a warm hand on the teacher's chest. On the teacher's lips, the smile remained, not from tightened muscles, but from a smile placed just before the final moment. The cremation ceremony was simple. Villagers came with yellow mustard flowers, rice cakes, and a few ripe tangerines. The disciple and his senior brother erected a frame and lit the funeral pyre with dry wood. As the flames climbed, smoke drifted across everyone's shoulders. Indiscriminate, the disciple saw his own eyes in the fire and remembered many old scenes. The day he first joined the monastery. The first time the master reprimanded him for spilling water. The second time the master praised him for picking up a broken shard of pottery without mention. And among those memories, the final smile appeared, not one to overpower anything, but quietly standing like a small marker. Afterwards, the ashes were brought to the base of the ginkgo tree. The disciple gently scattered handfuls in a circle as the aroma of ash felt warm and clean. An old woman whispered. The master felt as light as a cloud. The disciple nodded. Back in his room, he opened the slender notebook and reread the 4 lines of the master's poem. Each time he read the word, smile, he felt his throat relax. That night, wind drifted in. The bamboo wind chime on the veranda rang twice. And then fell silent. He lay down, placed a hand on his belly, and inhaled a deep breath as if learning to breathe for the very first time. The breath of old returned, sunshine set to play. He whispered to himself. A few days later, someone asked him, how could the master have smiled? He answered, he did not smile to forget death. He smiled so that dying could be an ordinary act. Like drinking tea, he smiled because he saw, no one truly leaves the table. The other person shook their head. That's hard. The disciple poured tea. Drink. Don't force a smile. Just place the cup down gently, that's enough. Life at the temple found its old rhythm again. Mornings brought meals, afternoons field work, evenings a short chant. The disciple carried on the simple tasks the master had done. Walking a circuit in the courtyard. Running his hand along trees. Adjusting a bell cord that drooped. One day, he nearly scolded a young brother for spilling rice. In that moment, the final smile surfaced like a falling leaf. And his anger deflated, his harsh words turned into, let me help you wipe up. Another time, dark clouds gathered and everyone rushed inside to cover drying herbs. He lifted his hand, then lowered it, watching the rain arrive, thinking to himself, your turn. Spring brought fresh green leaves on the ginkgo, soft and lush like tongues of wind. The disciple placed the broken bamboo fan on the window sill, the wooden pipe on its shelf, and the thin notebook into the drawer below. As he closed the drawer, the hinge squeaked dryly, and he smiled softly, not loudly, not quietly, just enough to recognize that if the master's smile lives on, it is here, in the way one places an object down, picks one up gently, knows when to surrender, admits fear, and then breathes. One night, he added a new line to the master's verse. Ink thick and letters round. Uncluttered. The day you no longer smile from fear. That day you learn to smile from seeing. He closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. Outside, the wind stopped. The wind chimes slept. But within his chest, a thin sound, like the contact of the nameless with the nameless. He smiled, not searching, not holding. Story 11. The Falling Leaf. On the mountainside behind the temple grows an ancient maple. Every autumn, its leaves blaze red like silent flames among the forest. From afar, villagers glance up and know autumn has truly arrived. One early morning, novice Theen, who had just turned 18, sat beneath it. Fingers rolling prayer beads, eyes tracing the red canopy. The wind had raged overnight, blanketing the ground with fallen leaves. Theen bent to pick one golden leaf. Its veins trembled in the cold breeze. Fragile like a scrap of paper, a nameless sadness rose within him. A leaf lives vibrantly. Then when it falls it becomes litter. Blown away, who will remember it? That fear was no stranger. Theen often silently pondered his own life. He had just ordained, with a full lifetime ahead, but his heart carried a secret anxiety. When youth fades, would a person be like that leaf? Fading, falling, forgotten? Just then, the Zen master joined him. Silently, he sat, gazing upward at the red canopy. After a pause, the master spoke into the quiet. Do you feel sorrow when the leaf falls? Theen lowered his head. Yes, master. It separates from the branch, withers, becomes dust. The master smiled softly. You looked only at the first path. A leaf does not fall simply to perish. It falls to return to the earth, to nourish the roots for spring's new shoots. If you see only loss, you feel sadness. But if you see continuity, you will smile. Theen remained silent. Inside him, a sliver of brightness awakened, but not yet clear. The next day, the teacher gave Theen a peculiar task. From now until the end of the season, each morning pick up one falling leaf and keep it in your hand until sunset. Live with it all day. Theen obeyed. On the first day, he chose a red leaf and carefully slipped it into his scripture book. He spent the day worrying it would crumple or be lost to wind. In the evening, he showed it to the master. I kept it intact. The teacher shook his head. You held it like an object, not like a companion. On day 2, he picked a yellow leaf. He carried it all day, occasionally gazing at it, even placing it on the meal table. At noon, a brown edge appeared, disturbed. He was about to pick a fresher one. The master intervened. Do not replace it. Observe the brown too. On day 3, he selected a leaf halfway decayed. During the chanting hour, he observed its curled form shedding crumbs onto his robe. He felt such heartbreak. That evening, he showed it to the master and said, It's about to disintegrate. The master nodded gently. Yes, it will, but in its decay lies germination. A seed will arise from the ashes. The leaf was never truly lost, it simply changed form. Over time, Theen learned not to treat the leaf like a precious object, but like a river, ever flowing. One afternoon, as the leaf in his hand turned to dust, he unexpectedly laughed. It is no longer in my hand, yet the earth beneath me received it. Perhaps, next season, that dust becomes a new leaf. One day, the villagers enlisted the monks to help set up the autumn festival. Children ran gathering leaves, laughing. An old woman sighed. Such beautiful leaves falling, what a waste. Theen, standing close by, replied softly, Madam, a leaf falls to beautify the earth. Without the earth, how will new leaves grow? She paused, then nodded slowly. At the market, a craftsman framed dried maple leaves into lanterns. When the lanterns were lit, light passed through the vein patterns like living blood vessels. Theen gazed in wonder. So beauty remains even in decay, he thought. Upon returning to the temple, he shared everything with his teacher. The teacher smiled. Do you see? Falling is never an end. Falling is simply another way to continue living. That night, wind blew up from the sea, so strong it made the entire maple grove tremble. Thousands of leaves fell simultaneously, turning into a blazing red rain under the moonlight. Theen ran out into the veranda, his eyes wide. For the first time, he did not feel sadness. Instead, he felt beauty, a fierce, radiant beauty, as if the entire forest were performing a farewell ritual to itself. In that moment, Theen understood his teacher's words. Beauty does not lie in prolonging the green, but in shining brilliantly even as we fall. He sat down and picked a fallen leaf that had just touched the ground. Placing it gently in his palm, he whispered, "Thank you." Then he let the leaf drift away on the wind. With no regret, a peculiar lightness spread within him, like undoing an old knot. Story 12: The Farmer and the Horse. In a land bordering the forest, where each evening the wind sweeps over the thatched roofs as if brushing the hill's hair, lived a farmer with his son and a gray horse. The farmer spoke little. His back was slightly bent like a question mark, and his eyes were gentle and clear as a rain-filled well. Every day, he awoke before dawn, welcomed the morning breeze into the house, stroked the horse's mane, checked the fence, then headed out to his fields. His home was simple, scented only with straw, grain, and sun-warmed indigo cloth. The village was small, but gossip traveled fast. A single cough turned into a weekend story at the tea stall. People showed affection through curiosity, and unintentionally weighted each other down with judgments. The farmer merely smiled and replied, "Maybe," placing each passing word like a pebble on the shore. He neither hated nor clung. His son, Track, young and strong as new corn, eyes burning with ambition, watched and learned. One morning, while fog still hovered over the fields, the gray horse broke free from its stall and raced into the forest. Hooves sprayed dew, then faded into quiet. The village buzzed. How unfortunate. The horse is your whole livelihood. How will you farm now? At every stall, the tale echoed, yet the farmer merely clasped his hands behind his back, looked toward the forest, and murmured, "Good or bad, who can say?" He resecured the stall, added a plank or two, repacked his old satchel. Track, burning inside, asked, "Father, will you go to fetch it?" He shook his head. "The forest is wide. Human strength is limited. You till your fields. I'll wait to see what the wind whispers." 3 days later, the wind changed. In the afternoon, the villagers heard heavy breathing at the forest's edge, and the gray horse returned. Mane tangled but eyes bright. Behind it followed 3 dark wild horses, sinews rippling with raw strength. The village erupted. What luck! 1 lost and 4 gained. They flocked around, voices thick like harvested straw. The farmer stroked his horse's neck, placed a hand over his heart, breathing slowly as if sipping cool water. He tethered the horses gently to posts so they could acclimate, and said only his familiar words, "Good or bad, who can say?" Some laughed at his detachment, others muttered, "If that's bad, then let it be." He nodded, as though in agreement with drifting clouds. That evening, Track bravely grabbed the nearest wild horse. "Father, let me tame it." With a whoop, he sprang onto its back like an arrow shot, hair streaming behind, laughter breaking in the wind. The horse bucked and twisted. Track held tight, leaning, holding. Dust rose like mist. Then sudden, his horse slipped on a wet stone, flipping him. His fall cracked the earth beneath him. His leg bent in a way it should not. A sickening sound. Night came, thick with scent of healing herbs and smoke. Outside, whispered judgments began. "See?" Fortune turned so quickly. The farmer placed a heated cloth over Track's swollen leg. "Pain is real," he said quietly, just so his son could hear. Track clenched his teeth, eyes brimming with anger at himself, at fate. The father sat still beside him, rooted like an old tree, breathing until the lamp died. Weeks passed. A government drum sounded from the county below. Military service was now required of able-bodied youths. Panic wove through the village. Many families scrambled, offering sticky rice, bottled water, salt packets, uncertain goodbyes, and still felt unready. Soldiers arrived, knocking at each door, checking names. At the farmer's door, one soldier looked at Track, his leg still bandaged. He leaned on a crutch and sighed, "Keep strong. You're excused this time." News spread. Some exhaled in relief. "Your boy is spared." Others fell silent, touched into remembering their own children. Someone murmured, "Misfortune turned fortune." The farmer escorted the soldiers from the gate and clasped his hands in farewell. That night, he sat on the veranda as insects tapped the screen. Neither celebration nor sorrow in his heart. He laid his hand on his knee, remembering the warmth of the horse's arrival, the pungent herb aroma in the kitchen, the soldier's eyes when marking another's name. Good or bad? Who knows? He whispered quietly to the wind. Later that rainy season came early, as if the sky had poured a basin of water onto the land. Streams swelled, banks lost firmness. The farmer, steady with cane, walked as if sensing each submerged stone. He watched the torrent sweep forward, eyes calm, heart clear. Rivers smashed fences, and neighbors called out. Track, awkward on his crutch, rushed out. The farmer guided, "Wait a breath. Watch the current first." They took a drier detour, secured the line, passed sacks of grain and children across. Back in the granary, floodwater seeped in. A jar of rare seed corn, one of the last, sat where dampness breached the corner. Track hadn't reached it in time. The farmer lifted the jar and placed it on a high shelf. When the water receded, deeper mud covered the floor. But the jar remained dry, seeds gleaming like night-bright eyes. Villagers sighed with relief. So fortunate, next season's seed is safe. The farmer nodded gently. "We shall see." But his hand lingered on the jar as though touching the village's century-long pulse. When the floods passed and the market reopened, the farmer took the gray horse down and exchanged it for salt, oil, a new sickle. At the edge of the market, an old horse dealer, eyes watering like morning dew, looked long at the gray horse and said, "This one travels well." Was it lost but returned? The farmer nodded. The old man smiled. Horses, like people, once they know the way home, they can wander far. Walking home against a headwind, with sand blowing into his pants. Track, now walking more steadily, sidled up next to his father and asked, "Father, why do you always say, 'Good luck, bad luck'? Who knows?" The farmer paused for a moment, then pointed toward the bamboo grove, where the wind split the leaves into countless thin strands. "You see," he said, "the wind changes direction. If we call something good luck, we shut the door, telling other winds not to come in. If we call it bad luck, it's the same, closing the door. I prefer to leave it slightly open, so the wind can pass through." Track pressed on. "But what if I want certainty?" The farmer smiled into the sunset. "The most certain thing is this moment, where your foot stands. What your hand is holding. Whether your breath is warm or cool. Let the naming of everything else drift with the wind. Early season, planting with patience. A new season arrived. The lid came off the seed jar, and the dry scent of grain reminded him of harvests from the past. The farmer and Track planted rice in the lower fields, using fresh water from a new irrigation canal. The weather cooperated, just the right amount of rain, and a gentle sun. The rice blossomed, and by moonlight, the paddy fields shimmered like silver. A passerby commented, "Your farm must be the best in the village this year." The farmer offered tea and replied, "I just did the planting. The rice grows on its own." He neither bragged nor hid the harvest. He ran his hand over the stack of sheaves, hearing a rustle that felt like the rice greeting him. In his heart, the phrase, "good luck, bad luck," became a soft whisper, reminding him to keep his hand open, so he could still feel wind, water, warmth, and coolness. Track asked, "Father, what should I do when people praise or criticize me?" The farmer answered, "Listen fully. Do not let the feelings get stuck. Then breathe, and gently let them go. When you are praised, do not chase after it. When criticized, do not run from it. Just keep walking, this step is enough." A lesson on luck from a traveler. One day, a young trader dropped his wagon wheel into a ditch. Track and his father helped him fix it. Frustrated, the trader grumbled, "This road is cursed. Something bad happens every trip." The farmer quietly replied, "The road is just a road. If you call it bad luck and walk tense, hurried, or full of regret, you become what you name it. Try simply walking the road, as someone who walks." Moments later, they returned the wheel to its place, and the cart rolled again. The trader, puzzled, asked, "That's it?" The farmer said, "Because you did not label it." Track looked at the young man's dusty, sweat-covered face and thought back to his own fall from the horse. He smiled, gently, like grass after the rain. End of season, ashes and insight. At the end of the season, the farmer burned dry straw into rings to warm his hands. Track sat beside him and asked, "Father, does good luck, bad luck, really matter?" The farmer stirred the ashes. The flames flickered as he said, "Yes, the feeling is real, just like heat and cold. But if you believe it is fixed fate, you forget what you are holding right now. If instead you see those things like the wind, coming and going, you can do your part calmly and keep the door open for what remains." "What is what remains?" Track asked. It is rain, sunlight, other people, and all the things you do not yet know. You do not need to know them in advance to live well now. He smiled, thin as smoke, warm as embers. The night wind carried the scent of newly burned straw onto their clothes. Nighttime calm and the whisper of equanimity. That night, the wind in the village went still. The horse in the stall breathed gently, like small waves moving under the earth. The farmer closed the door, leaving the second latch slightly loose, just enough to let in a breeze. He told Track, "Sleep now. Tomorrow brings dew." The lights stayed off. Just before he shut his eyes, Track heard his father stir in sleep, the rhythm of his breathing slow and deep. Like drawing water from a well, the wind shifted lightly, like a hand resting gently on his forehead, and the familiar phrase settled like a thin blanket across his chest: "Good luck." Bad luck, who knows? He exhaled, and laid the long day down, letting the night pass over him without carrying its weight. One year, a storm blew in, the forest leaned and swayed, rain lashing down like whips, the lake rising with frothy, swirling waves. Everyone hurried to secure rooftops and brace the doors. Tam followed his teacher out onto the veranda to look at the lake. The water was muddy, white foam churning, and the moon had vanished. Tam sighed. "Teacher, with the storm, the moon has truly disappeared." The teacher shook his head. "No, the moon is still there in the sky. You cannot see it because the water is far too turbulent. It is like inside your mind, when suffering stirs the waves. You think the light is gone, but the moon remains once the storm passes. Do not trust what you perceive in the midst of turmoil." That teaching soaked into him like rain into fabric. Tam stood there for a long while, letting the storm and wind lash his face, and gradually, his fear faded. A few years later, Tam had grown older, and his mind steadied. One evening, he sat by the lake. Wind whispered in the bamboo leaves, and he saw the moon's soft glow, faint but clear, reflected in the rippling water. He smiled. "The moon has never left the lake. Only my eyes were confused." From that point on, whenever someone asked, "What is spiritual cultivation?" Tam would point at the lake. It is like the moon reflected in water. When the lake is still, the reflection is clear. When it is stirred, do not forget the moon remains. Story 14: The Blind Man and the Lantern. Night in the riverside village began as the rhythmic sound of pestles pounding rice faded. The scent of straw smoke retreated from thatched roofs, and a quiet so gentle you could hold it in your hand enveloped the evening. The dirt road along the water shimmered in old puddles reflecting stars. Kang, a man blind since childhood, stepped out just as the village began lighting its lamps. His left hand brushed along the mossy wall, while his right held a worn bamboo cane wrapped at the tip with cloth so it would not startle others. Each deliberate step he took created a steady rhythm with the cane tapping the ground. Like a silent chant, tonight, he walked to Lan's house, the papermaker of lanterns. Every mid-autumn festival, his porch was hung with carp lanterns, butterfly lanterns, long-eared rabbit lanterns. Lan greeted Kang with a deep chuckle. "Just in time. I have just finished a new frame." Kang sat down on a bamboo chair, slowly tracing the wet lantern frame with his fingers, feeling the smooth bamboo and the lingering moisture. "Is it beautiful?" Lan asked. Kang replied, Beauty is when tonight there is one more light so people can see each other. Lan laughed. You speak like a monk. Kang was no monk, and he never preached, but he understood the night better than most. As a child, he once got lost briefly when his mother's hand slipped away. A stranger tapped his shoulder and said, "Your hand is here," then led him home. Since then, Kang learned the world by touch, cane touching earth, hand touching wall, breeze touching skin. He told himself, if possible, be a gentle touch so that others walk safely. That mid-autumn night, Lan gifted Kang a small paper lantern with a sturdy bamboo frame and thin oil paper, inside which sat a short candle. Wear it on your chest, Lan said, tying a string around his neck so the lantern rested on his left chest. So others know to avoid colliding. Kang stood still, his figure glowing softly. He smiled with his eyes, his heart felt as light as a breeze over the river. Kang walked down the slope. Vendors carrying goods made way for him. A child ran up and exclaimed, "Sir, your lantern is beautiful." Kang gently tapped the child's head. "The lantern is so you can see, it is not for me." The child understood just enough before darting away, the wooden clogs tapping softly like a string of small sounds. From that night on, anytime he went out, Kang lit his lantern. He felt more part of the human flow, like a bright dot in the long sentence of the village. He did not need to see to know that light was fulfilling its task, signaling to others someone was walking through the night. When the rainy season arrived, darkness thickened between the fences. One damp night, Kang walked more slowly, his left hand tracing the cold wall. The rain pounded, and his lantern emitted soft sputters. He shielded it with his conical hat, yet he could still hear the fire battling the damp. He trusted the lantern was still lit because he felt a gentle warmth against his chest. At a narrow bend, a man carrying bamboo ran toward him. Their bodies brushed. The bamboo bundle struck Kang's shoulder, and he lost his balance and fell into a puddle. "What kind of walking is that?" the man barked. "Cannot you see the lantern?" Kang quickly apologized, his hand exploring his chest, only to find the cold frame and the smell of smoke. The flame had long gone out, and he had not noticed. The man carrying the bamboo looked awkward. "Sorry. I thought you could see me." Kang exhaled, embarrassment mixed with sorrow. He had trusted the light without checking it was still there. Both stood under the rain, water dripping from the brim of his hat in a thin curtain. The man took out a lighter and relit Kang's candle. The flame flickered and steadied. Before leaving, Kang said, "Thank you. This lantern is for you too." The man bowed, "And for you. If you remember to look again." The next day, Kang went to the temple to burn incense as usual. The abbot saw mud on his robe and asked what had happened. Kang recounted the story plainly. No additions. The abbot smiled kindly. "Your outer lantern went out. Do you have an inner lantern?" Kang was silent. The abbot spoke softly. "The external lantern lets others see you. The inner lantern lets you see what you once believed. Yesterday you thought the lantern still burned, so you walked as if you held one. If you pay attention to a single breath, just one, you would have heard the rain extinguish it." Kang sat on the temple porch for a long time. The rain subsided, and the brick floor warmed. He listened to the wind in leaves, the chime of a wind bell, the faint cough in the kitchen, and the smallest sound, his belief in something outdated. He returned to lands. Please help me with something. They made a small brass ring and bound it to the cane's tip. Walking in the night, each tap sounded a gentle ting. Kang listened to the ring and knew he was walking. Others knew someone was approaching. He still wore the lantern, but whenever wind stirred, he covered it at each turn. He checked for the candle's warmth. Fire and sound each played their part, not depending on each other, yet not separate. In the nights that followed, he walked more smoothly. The ting was steady like a heartbeat. Once, a child nearly collided but stopped when she heard the ring, gasped, and then smiled. A woman selling sticky rice nearby crouched. "Your cane's sound comforts me." Kang replied, "It comforts me too." Gradually, villagers began tying small bells to baskets, carts, and door frames, not to make noise, but so they could know each other's presence. Lan hung a string of lanterns under his porch when heavy rain fell. He switched to oil lamps when wind blew. He lit lamps inside and left the doors slightly ajar so the light could spill out. The village learned to have many lanterns, lanterns of fire, lanterns of sound, lanterns of the habit of checking one's heart before believing something too quickly. A young man from the upper village came down looking for work and lost his way in the dark. Kang heard unfamiliar footsteps and hurried breathing, so he stopped and waited. "Sir, the way to the river dock?" The young man's voice was sharp, like someone who had just lost something. Kang said, "Slow down. Listen to the sound of my cane." They walked together for a while. The flame in Kang's lantern was small. The young man said, "Your lantern is too dim." Kang smiled. "It is enough for you to see the next step. The rest of the steps are yours to take." When they reached the crossroad, the young man thanked him and added, "You did not boast about your lantern, but what I remember is the sound of your cane." Kang replied, "A lantern is not for showing off. When we boast, the flame wastes oil. When we use it, the flame knows where to go." The river rose with a strong tide, and a corner of the dirt bank collapsed. The whole village came out to reinforce it. That night, rain poured down. Many house lights went out, the soft ringing of bells on canes, carts, and doorways formed a scattered symphony. Kang stood on a high step, watching people carry soil. Each time someone passed by, his heart's lantern lit up, just from hearing a single ting, a small sign of presence. Suddenly, the wind howled, and the lantern on his chest blew out. No one turned back, everyone was busy. Kang reached up and touched the frame. It was cold. He smiled, unstrapped the lantern from his neck and set it aside, raising his cane a little higher. The small bell still chimed, ting. He stepped down and joined the line. He could not see anyone's face, but each time one ting echoed another nearby, he knew he was not alone. When the floodwaters receded, the village held a lantern floating ceremony on the river. Lan prepared hundreds of paper lanterns, each in a different shape. Children were excited. Elders sat by the bank, their hands sticky with glue, eyes shimmering. Kang arrived, and Lan placed a boat-shaped lantern into his hands. "Let this one go for me." Kang knelt at the water's edge, feeling the smooth cold of the river. He could not see, but he heard the water swirl around his wrist like someone softly laughing. He placed the lantern boat gently onto the surface and gave it a light push. The river carried it away. Others let theirs go too. And soon the entire surface became a sky beneath their feet, colored stars. Kang stood up, gripping his cane, warmth rising in his chest even though there was no candle lit there. He whispered, speaking to no one in particular, "Every lantern departs. And every night passes. We remain by listening to the sound of our own steps." Late at night, Kang returned home. He placed his cane beside his bed and blew out the oil lamp. The room fell into complete darkness, silent like a deep well. He lay on his side, placing his hand over his chest, where the paper lantern used to hang. There was no heat from the candle, only a soft warmth from his own palm. He listened to his heartbeat, like a tiny brass bell ringing in his pocket. He smiled, not because the world had suddenly become bright, but because he now knew, when the outer lantern goes out, the inner one may still be enough to take one step. Before drifting to sleep, he remembered the night he collided with the bundle of bamboo, the chill of the mud, the awkwardness, and then a new flame relit. He whispered, "Grateful for the collisions that taught me to check the light." Then he slept, not expecting anything from the night, not asking it to be kind. Time flowed like water down the rapids. After the big rains, the villagers kept a few habits, tying bells to door corners, slowing down at bends, saying, "Excuse me," when passing behind one another at night, and asking, "Is your lantern still lit?" as a way of saying, "Are you okay?" Lan kept making lanterns, but now also taught the children how to tie bells. The abbot would tell stories about Kang to newcomers. We need lanterns so others can see us, but we also need lanterns to reflect on what we believe in. Kang grew older. The bamboo cane wore down where his hand held it. The brass bell was no longer shiny, but its sound remained full. One evening on the porch, he overheard two people arguing about right and wrong. He did not lecture, he simply tapped his cane lightly, ting. The two laughed. Sometimes, just one small sound is enough to remind us, before being right or wrong. We are walking the same dark path, each holding a different kind of light. While the wind shifts without warning, the hanging garden became a classroom without a blackboard. Lack learned the scent of sunshine on drying clothes, listened to leaves sticking softly after the rain, and noticed an ant carrying a butterfly wing 3 times its size. It did not fight the wind, it waited for a gentle breeze. He smiled at the image. Silly but true. One afternoon, Lack received news from home. An older brother accused him of being heartless for missing an ancestral death anniversary. The few sharp words remained, like grit in the eye. The door of his chest slammed shut. He had to write back right away. Explain, justify. He rushed to his room, hands trembling over the page. But just before the pen touched paper, he heard a sound in his mind, the creak of the garden door, pulled lightly inward. He paused. This door opens inward. He put the pen down and sat up straight. I am angry. I am hurt. Inhale, no anger. Exhale, no hurt. 1 round, 2 rounds. Inside, there was a lock. The urge to be understood right now. He touched that lock with awareness, and heard a soft click. It released. Then he wrote, not from tension, but from clarity. Brother, I am sorry I could not come home. I remember. I hope next time I will be less tied up. If you are upset, that is okay. Whenever you want. Let's talk. The letter felt like pulling the door gently inward, letting fresh air in for both of them to breathe. After sending it, Lack stepped into the garden. He opened the door very slowly. Wind passed through his sleeves. He suddenly understood. Many locks are imaginary, born where we urgently need others to be right with us. Right away, opening inward means recognizing that need and setting it down just a little. Then, no latch is strong enough to keep the door shut. At summer's end, a storm came. Wind howled through the hallways, windows rattling like teeth. Lack ran into the yard and saw the garden door being sucked outward by the wind, slamming wildly against the wall. He grabbed the handle and pulled it hard toward himself, bracing it with a wooden wedge and fastening a rope. Rain slashed his face with a biting chill. The teacher appeared in a raincoat, helping him steady the door. Amid the storm's roar, the teacher spoke as if beside a quiet stove. See? When you push into the storm, you fall. When you pull toward yourself, you stand. The rain stopped. The courtyard was covered in leaves. The sky turned smooth, like the skin of a ripe fruit. He and the teacher sat under the eaves, listening to water drip from the roof. The teacher said, "Tonight you experienced both. The door banged from being pushed by wind, and calmed when you pulled it the right way. The heart is the same. When you resist what is, it knocks you down. Pull it in, embrace it, and the mind stands still." Lack looked at his hands, bruised from cold, yet warm from the work done. He felt an empty, clean space in his chest, like the sky scrubbed clean after a heavy storm. One evening, a traveler came asking for a place to rest. His shoulder showed marks from straps. His hand gripped a suitcase handled tightly. He ate little but spoke much of misfortunes, debts, betrayals. Lack brewed tea and listened. Even in sleep, the man clung to his suitcase as if it were a shore. In the morning, before leaving, the traveler sighed. "Life has closed every door in front of me." Lack led him to the yard, stood by the wooden door. "Try opening it." The man pushed. It did not budge. He looked at Lack for help. Lack pulled gently. The door opened. The traveler stood stunned, then chuckled, then teared up. He looked at his suitcase. "I have been pushing for years." Lack nodded. "Sometimes, even a suitcase opens by pulling the zipper toward yourself." They laughed together. The sound touched the morning, bouncing like raindrops on leaves. Weeks later, people noticed Lack could sleep again. He no longer forced himself into the correct meditation posture. He just did 4 things: turned off the light early, washed his face with warm water, left his door slightly ajar, and placed a small verse on his tongue. "If I do not sleep, I will rest. If I think, I will know. If I know, I will smile." No magic involved, just no longer forcing sleep to come, only drawing his body and mind back toward himself. Where there was a bed, a blanket, and breath. One night, after a tough day, he could not sleep again. Instead of resenting the effort, he placed a hand on his belly. The night opens inward too. I will open with it. His eyes did not close by force, they were simply tired. And tiredness, he realized, was a kind of opening. He drifted off mid-verse, like a door left slightly open, letting the wind enter slowly. The teacher sent Lack to help at the market one day. The crowding, haggling, shouting, cartwheels, all jostled like waves. A customer slammed a bowl down, upset at paying too much. Lack felt his chest ready to push back with logic. This is the market. But he pulled inward. I am tense. Breath returned to calm. He poured tea and said, if you are not in a rush, I can exchange it. The man's face softened, like cloth touching water. On another day, out in the fields, the sun blazed. His back ached. He wanted to rush through it. Instead of bracing, he paused for a minute. He brought his awareness back to his hands in the mud, to the heat on his neck, to the sound of cicadas rising. He continued, half a beat slower, but steady. By the end, the work was done, and no thorn remained in his chest. On the wooden door, the teacher once wrote 4 small words in charcoal on the inside edge, only visible once it was opened. Opens inward. One afternoon, a gust slammed the door shut, smudging the writing. Lack wiped it clean and rewrote it in white chalk. He added a new line on the doorstep, slightly ajar. The teacher passed by, saw it, and smiled. You're learning go. Lack looked puzzled. The teacher explained, in the game, you should not try to capture every space. Leave gaps so the air can move, then the territory thrives. The heart is the same. On a late autumn noon, the sky was a thin blue. Lack entered the hanging garden, pulled the door. It made a soft, contented sound. He sat on the step, back against the wall, sunlight filtering through the leaves into spotted patches of light. He was not seeking inspiration. He was not chasing peace. He just sat. A cloud drifted by. He drifted with it. He fell asleep, lips still parting the unfinished verse. When he woke, the wind had shifted, and bamboo leaves had scattered lightly across the steps. He smiled softly. The door opened. The cloud came in. Sleep came in. Nothing was forced. He had simply pulled his heart back toward himself. That night, before bed, he wrote in his notebook, do not shove life like a door in the wrong direction. Pull the heart inward, the door opens. Leave it ajar. The wind will find its way. Dear friend, the journey we have just taken together through these Zen stories may feel like a long walk through forests, across rivers, and even across the skies within your own soul. Each story, each image, each breath has been like a small mirror, allowing you to reflect on your inner world when the waves were stirred, when the waters stilled, and when peace returned simply by letting go. If your eyes are gently closed now, your body growing lighter, and your mind as calm as a still lake, then go ahead and smile. Sleep is coming close, softly, naturally, like the moon touching the surface of water. Let all worries, heaviness, and unfinished thoughts dissolve like clouds fading at dusk. You do not need to do anything more, just give yourself permission to rest. Crescent moon, may your sleep be peaceful, gentle, and full of fresh energy when morning arrives. If these Zen stories have brought you calm and deep rest, I invite you to stay connected by subscribing to Silent Soul Garden. Every subscription, every share is a seed of peace you plant, helping this quiet garden grow greener, wider, and reaching more people who are searching for a resting place for their soul. Sparkles, click subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you will always be here for the next journey with Zen stories.